Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are back after a nice Easter holiday. John, happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you, and great being back here at Southcom.
I know. Well, we always have so much to talk about, so... and we have lots to talk about, but I do want to tease our lineup today. We are going to be joined. He's a Veronica Live family member, so he's been on several times. He's always on the national stage. Steve Goreham will be joining us as our first guest this morning. He's written that book, Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure, and we have a lot to talk about with him because Secretary Judge, however you say his name, has said that we're silly and people because we don't want to totally go EV by 2030. So the man is on crack. And so we'll get into that with Steve. So that's breaking this week, that if you don't go EV, it's like being from the 90s with your landline, John.
Does he even own a car? I mean,
no.
He's obviously chauffeur driven around by somebody in a gas-powered vehicle.
Exactly. So we'll talk with Steve about the breaking news. And, they're always trying to take our pizza ovens away, which, dear Lord, please don't take our number one. That's probably America's number one staple is a piece of pizza. So please no.
Well, they've already screwed up your washer. They've already screwed up your dishwasher. They've done away with incandescent light bulbs. I mean, the government knows everything, Let's have more of it.
So true. And then we're going to be joined by Florida Representative Dr. Joel Rudman from District 3. So he's over in the Santa Rosa area, and I met him during my Republican Liberty Caucus running around the Capitol in Tallahassee when I learned how sausage making happened there, and I was so disappointed. But he was actually my favorite legislator that I met. And this was his first, he's wrapping up his first stint representing Floridians. And he was actually excellent, John. And I know you've researched him this morning or, this week as he's for prep to come on the show. And I love everything about him because he really doesn't care. He's like, I'm there to fight for, the people. And so I think he's one of those, a real politician that I was thinking this morning. I was like, he needs to run for Congress. So I'm going to ask him that. I'm electing him, putting him forward to run for Congress. But he's got a lot to say, and he's kind of fun because he has his own rock band. So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to be joined by a Louisiana attorney that his name is Daniel Street, and he's got several books on Amazon called Fake News Exposed about Trump, and he breaks down, and he's got 3 of them out there, all the fake news that the media runs with. And so we're going to talk about, why he wrote these books, how he did his research. Obviously he's a Trumper. So I was texting him, and he seems like a great guy. He was a little funny in text, so I think we'll have a great interview with him. So big show already. Yeah,
I know. It's going to be the topics are just wide ranging, as far as what we're going to cover, and then on top of that, the afterburner. I mean, it was just there are so many stories out there. You don't even hardly know where to. We try to pick like 10 to 15 good stories, to have an afterburner, and I mean, it was just. Trying to pick from this stuff is getting hard because there's so much of it.
It's crazy.
Like,
every day something breaks, and then I have gone bananas on X, my new platform. So we'll have to do some Veronica X tweets. I actually, since I became active, has it been like a month I've been active? Since I got my check mark.
Yeah, you got verified.
I've been very active. And every week I've been on like 25,000 feeds. And this week I broke over 50,000 feeds with some of my tweets. So I can't wait to share what some of my top tweets were. But yeah, this morning I'm on 53,000. I've been in 53,000 feeds, so I'm climbing the ladder.
Okay, and, so that's a good thing, right?
Well,
says the guy with no feeds.
Yeah. Well, because what's crazy is that Zuckerberg wants to control Facebook again, and politics, and I'm like, oh, here we go. So I do honestly I follow, like, I make sure that anything that Elon Musk tweets, I get instantly, because I'm telling you, the man has become a Republican because he sees the crap that's gone on in our society. So,
yeah. Well, there's that one of the stories. Speaking of afterburner, it's one of the stories in the afterburner is Wisconsin bans Zuckerbucks. People don't seem to remember that Zuckerberg spent $400 million in the last election cycle trying to enhance Democrat turnout. Actually giving money to public officials. And Wisconsin has banned that. Most states, everybody should. Private companies have no business giving public officials money for any kind of voter turnout or voter drives. That's not the business that they're in. The supervisor of elections business is to run an election, not go out and be paid by a private individual to go out and register more people. I mean, that is so corrosive to everybody's talking about we need to save our democracy. Well, talk about corrosiveness and destroying democracy. That's exactly you're buying an election. Billionaires are buying elections is what it comes down to.
It's just so funny because I've become so active now on Twitter, X, and for some reason some of these, like Barbara Streisand, keeps popping up in my feed because that I go back to the 8-track tape in the Cadillac that my parents had, and I was subjected to Barbara Streisand and Neil Diamond for my teen years. Lord help me. And back in the day they were big, of course, but she's so liberal. And then Rob Reiner's the other one. I don't know why I keep getting liberal posts or liberal people in my feed because I haven't followed them, and they're so entitled. And that was another one of the tweets that I put out there because again, John Kerry was out there. He's always preaching to you and me. So I said, Preacher Kerry, about, my what is it? My carbon footprint stamp.
Yeah, carbon footprint. Yeah. Well, he flies around in his private jet that's not his, but sort of his wife's and not his.
Yeah. So I wrote, one of my tweets was like, give me a break, Preacher Kerry. I'll be back in coach, so. But anyway.
Well, you know that Barbara Streisand has always been shorthand for bull hockey, right?
Well, she's a pain, and who keeps subjecting her into my ex? And then we'll talk about J.K. Rowling because I started following her, and oh my goodness, she gets death threats on X, and so thank God she's worth so much to have all the security.
And they're threatening to arrest her in Scotland, because she won't use proper pronouns.
Well, we'll talk about it because she's a liberal. But we've got a big show on Veronica Live this morning, and I'm here with statesman John Salak, and I'll have to talk about last night I went out with the F-22 baby pilots, and I'm still recovering. It was fun, so we'll have to talk about that a little later too, but we'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome back to Veronica Live, and we're here with Steve Goreham. He is the Executive Director of the Climate Science Coalition of America and the author of 4 books, and our favorite book ever for talking about energy and greenness is The Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. And, John and I read that book last year, Steve, and that was like one of my top Veronica picks for 2023 because it was outstanding, and you really talk about the renewable energy and make it so people that don't understand this concept, we can finally understand it. So welcome back, Steve, to Veronica Live.
Great to join you, Veronica. Thanks for the kind words, and John, good to be back.
Well, the number one thing that John and I need to talk to you about is Secretary Buttigieg came out this week talking about how we're going to be EV-centric by 2030 and that we are not with the program because we're fighting him, and it's all about, we're people from the 1990s stuck to our landlines. So I wanted to talk to you about that, Steve, because 2030 is right around the corner. Is he on crack with this?
Well, no, I think he's a little bit off. We're actually EVs have been penetrating world markets and the U.S. for a number of years, but they hit a speed bump last year. And just this first quarter, the figures are out, and they actually lost share of the U.S. Light vehicle market. They only grew about 2%, and the market grew a little bit more. Fourth quarter last year, EV sales actually declined in California, declined in Germany, first time ever. Ford Motor lost $4.7 billion last year on their EV business, and that was about $65,000 per vehicle for the year. And so they've kind of hit a bit of a speed bump, and the issues with EVs are starting to pile up.
Well, isn't one of the issues that to buy a Ford Lightning, it's like $100K? Your pocketbook can't handle it, Steve.
Yeah, they're very high. I think the cheapest models are 50, 60, but yeah, the more expensive models are close to $100K. And so cost is a big deal, but there's a bunch of other problems too. The insurance is another big cost. It's about 70% higher in the U.S. now to insure an electric vehicle versus a gasoline car. And in England, very tough to get insurance right now, I think. And if you do, you pay about £5,000 annually to insure your electric vehicle. Very, very high. And a problem is with if you get into a minor collision and you touch the battery in any way, they may have to replace the whole battery, which can cost up to $20,000 or so. So that's a big issue.
That is one of the other things is, out of California is they're basically mandating electric semi trucks, the class 8 type trucks.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things I was laughing at, I read some, I think it was Wall Street Journal about 2 months ago, had a story of a driver that took from the port, took containers from the port and took them inland for delivery. And They were describing his day, and the amount of time that he wasted at charging stations was astonishing. And his productivity was probably about a quarter of what it would have been with a diesel. But one of the things we talked last time we had you on, we were talking about the national worldwide energy demand and converting to renewables and everything. And one of the things I came across was the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I didn't know we had such a thing, but apparently we do.
Yeah.
They came out with a study in December that said that we would need 504 terawatts per year just to charge these electric trucks. And I'm like, and they're talking about like 1 megawatt charging stations. And I'm like, Do you know what 1 megawatt power to a business takes to get put in? And I'm like, you want to put a bunch of charging stations in that are 1 megawatt plus? I mean, is anybody rational about this stuff?
Well, and that's my question:
is
can our grid handle this, Steve?
No, I mean, there's a million issues with these trucks, and they're in some sort of fantasy land. Both the state of California, which passed the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, as of January 1st, all new, basically heavy trucks have to be zero emissions vehicles. And then we just had the federal government come out with Phase 3, the EPA, for regulations for heavy trucks, and they want everybody to go to heavy trucks too. And you're right, it's just crazy. In California, they set up the first charging station basically for heavy trucks in the nation with a whole pile of California money. They've got like 24 or 28 outlets. And if they put a truck on each one of those and charge them, they would use as much electricity as San Bernardino. A city of 200,000 people is the amount of electricity you would need to charge these things. This just isn't going to happen. This is beyond anything that is sensible in any way. There was just an article about a guy who's a truck manufacturer. He said, if you gave me one of these trucks, I wouldn't use it because it's got so much weight and I would lose payload. And I have to spend hours to charge it. And there are no charging stations around the country. Many folks have pointed out that we need 2 or 3 times as many trucks on the road if we went. So how is that going to be environmentally friendly? Let's double the number of trucks on the road, which are electrics, to get rid of the diesel trucks. But this is fantasy land. These people are not. There's no reality entering in this argument about electric transportation.
Well, so is it like our washing machines and dishwashers and stuff, where the government passes some stupid regulation that says, you can only use 2 gallons of water, to wash your dishes in the dishwasher, and if they don't get clean, who cares? That's your problem, not ours. We're gonna be environmentally friendly. Is that the whole objective? It's just it's the show and not and the consequences be damned.
Yeah, and then but this is just this truck thing is so far out of whack, it's crazy. So the advanced clean fleets in California, as of January of this year, although they're trying to relax it a little because nobody can do it, but you mentioned those trucks that take the freight from the ports to the railheads. Those are called drayage trucks. They have to be zero emissions. All major truck fleets, all the big companies, if they register any new truck, it's got to be zero emissions. They have to reduce their percentage of fleets that are diesel. And by the way, so this isn't going to happen. We have 19 states now that are suing the EPA because the EPA has granted a waiver to California to put in these regs. We're going to have major suits over the EPA Phase 3 stuff as well. But some of these disadvantages are huge. So the range on an electric truck is about 250 to 300 miles. The range on a diesel truck is 1,500 miles. You can refuel a diesel truck in 15 minutes, but it takes hours to charge an electric truck. Electric trucks have about 10,000 pounds more weight, and so that comes out of the freight you can carry. They cost 2 to 3 times as much for an electric as a diesel heavy truck. And as I mentioned, there are no chargers anywhere. Again, another story, somebody wanted to set up a charging station near Joliet, Interstate Route 80. And they went to the city and said, we want to do this. And he said, well, you're going to use more electricity than the entire city of Joliet. I mean, how could we possibly do this? So people have just gone off the deep end with this. This is beyond any kind of reality, and it's all going to come crashing down, which is one of the things I talk about in Green Breakdown.
Well, the breaking story, sorry, John, the breaking story this morning, Steve, is wearing jeans is bad for the earth. And apparently wearing a pair of jeans is like driving 6 miles with the carbon footprint. And I'm going, first it was my pizza oven, and now they're going after an American staple, the blue jeans. It's just out of control, honestly.
Now it's jeans, right? I saw another article saying that it was computing how much greenhouse gases people use to go visit Yellowstone, and thought it was so terrible people were driving to Yellowstone. Last month, the World Health Organization proposed a global ban on consumption of meat and dairy products. I'm like, what planet are you living on? And then the United Nations, of course, wants everybody to eat insects because they, quote, emit less greenhouse gases and less ammonia than cattle or pigs. They require significantly less land or water than cattle rearing. This stuff is just crazy, and you got to wonder. You got to wonder where the United Nations and elites of this world come from, but they are far beyond anything which is rational at this point.
I'm just wondering what the psychological basis is. I mean, you take people that would, I gather they're all political actors. Okay, so you have to look at it in that lens. But even political actors have rational thought processes occasionally, and it's like you've taken the extreme green people who think that people are the enemy of the earth. That the earth would be a whole lot better if we eliminated the human population. Mother Earth would be really wonderful. But, what's causing them to do this? I mean, you can give them the numbers, and as you pointed out, like net zero is a fantasy. It's a great talking point, but it's a fantasy, as far as reality and life goes. And what is it? Where's this disconnect happening at?
Yeah, it's been kind of a long history. So just a little bit of history. So in the 1970s, a bunch of computer modelers started building climate models, and some scientists noticed that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was rising slowly. It had gone in the 50s from about 315 parts per million. Now today it's up over 420 parts per million. It was rising, but people should know this is about 4 molecules in every 10,000 in the atmosphere. It's very, very small, and the amount that we could have put up there in history is only a fraction of one of those 4 molecules. But they developed these computer modelers, and then we had a guy by the name of Dr. James Hansen, who was at NASA, who testified in front of Congress in 1988 and said that he thought he was 99% sure that the global temperatures are rising and people were causing it. That's what his computer modelers showed. And then we had the United Nations that set up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who within 1 year found that humans were causing dangerous global warming. And then in 1993, we had the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, and 40 nations in the European Union signed up to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It was a pretty quick process. Now, the United Nations, for many decades, has had 3 major goals that they've announced. One is to become an environmental leader, and they've used the climate scare to do that. Second, they want to set up a world government. And the first climate conferences, President Jacques Chirac of France said these were the first example of global government. And then they want to redistribute wealth from the United States and Europe, the wealthy nations, to the poor nations of the world. And they've been using the climate scare to do that. We're supposed to send these climate funds. Matter of fact, India is asked for the small sum of $1 trillion a year to get to net zero by 2070. Nobody's doing that, but so this thing has grown and grown, but now it's gotten all out of hand. It's become the center for every environmental group, the reason for their existence. Of course, we have wind and solar and biofuel industries. We have deans of sustainability at colleges, vice presidents of sustainability at companies. We have thousands of consultants that help companies become green. It's just become a massive industry. Nevertheless, if you look at the evidence closely, it shows that global warming is dominated by nature, not what people are doing. Nevertheless, we're in the midst of the biggest superstition in modern history, the fear that this trace gas is causing dangerous warming. It is remarkable. We live in strange times.
Well, I was going to ask you about climate change, and because people say that it causes inflation. Because of course the Biden administration wants to blame everything but themselves on the cause of inflation. So why do people say that, Steve? That climate change is causing inflation?
Well, I don't know. They probably got a government contract to do this study, but this was published in Communications, Earth and Environment. Just back in March, and basically this was the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact in Europe, and they said that we're going to have food inflation of 3% per year for the next decade. They call it climateflation. But, this isn't really supported by any kind of evidence. If you look at history, 1960 to today, the world production of corn, rice, and wheat has increased by a factor of 5. Our farmers are terribly productive nowadays. They're using less land, producing huge amounts of output. And if you look at the real price of all these things, they've gone down less than inflation over the last 50 or 60 years. So this is another projection that isn't based on any kind of reality. But, if it's inflation, if it's weather, if it's the food you eat, if it's anything you do, your blue jeans, it's got to be a problem with the climate. And this is just another one of those studies.
Well, I wanted to ask you, John and I talked about this. Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law had a terrible EV accident. She was drinking, and it's come out that she was very drunk. But the vehicle, her Tesla, ended up in a pond, and she ended up drowning. Yep. And when the rescue people showed up, they were afraid to do anything with the vehicle. They were afraid they were going to get shocked, and there was just so many concerns. So I don't think we're ready on any level to go full EV by 2030, when we don't even, and John and I have talked about this with you before, when we had Hurricane Michael here, people that didn't drive their Teslas away, like they caught on fire and they couldn't get the fire to stop with the batteries.
And burn their house down, yeah, because it was in the garage.
So we're so not ready.
There's a big problem. Yeah, and it just shouldn't be forced on people. The problem with all this is that the government wants to force everybody to do it because they think if everybody drives an EV, we're going to stop the oceans from rising. You know, that is the definition of modern superstition. But you're right. We still have a self-ignition problem with cars, and because of the lithium batteries, issues in Florida and around the country and all over. They still tend to be small, but you know, gasoline cars don't catch on when they're just sitting. They catch fire when they're sitting in the garage. Usually, you have to be in a collision or something for that to occur. So it is a tough kind of a situation. We had an example here in Elk Grove this last summer. A guy was driving his Tesla. It started to shake. He pulled off the road and it burst into flames, and he didn't have time to get the child seats out of the back of his vehicle. He was really pleased his kids weren't along with him at the time.
Gosh.
We have our Vice President Kamala Harris, who's been gushing about electric buses for kids, and I can show you, you know, God forbid, but I can show you a bunch of videos of electric buses that have ignited. There's one in China where adults are literally jumping out of this burning vehicle through the door trying to get away. And I tell my kids, don't put our grandkids on electric buses if you can avoid it. I don't want to see that to occur. So these things are you know, something we need to work out over time with. And by the way, you know what the biggest source of fires in New York City is now?
No idea.
Lithium-ion battery chargers on those little scooters.
Electric scooters. You're right. I don't know. Maybe we talked about that before, but
I forgot.
They have they're getting like 200 of those a year, and that's a bigger source of fire than smoking or cooking or anything else. And again, I've told my landlord, don't bring any. You know, we were on a property in Virginia Beach. Don't let any tenants bring electric bikes and park them inside. We don't need that.
But, you know, speaking of that, you know, the batteries and stuff, you know, particularly like conventional batteries, you know, give off hydrogen gas, and that's been a known explosion hazard for years. I'm just curious, is anybody looking at, you know, the other beside electric is hydrogen? You know, they want to make hydrogen fueled trucks and airplanes and all kinds of stuff like that, and then they want to build a hydrogen infrastructure, but nobody's talking about the potential for disaster, you know, when the thing blows up.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article about that a couple months ago about how governments are ignoring safety issues with green energy, and I talked about EVs, but also hydrogen. If you ever want to read something ugly, read the history of hydrogen airships. The world was trying to build these dirigibles from about 1905 to 1937 when the Hindenburg blew up. And there were literally dozens of these things that ignited and exploded, and many, many people killed. And then finally they abandoned them. They were using them for the gas inside the dirigible, not for fuel. But nevertheless, these things are a problem. The hydrogen ignites with very, very low levels of energy. And the flames, actually, you can't see them. They burn so cleanly, you can't even see the flame. And so people that work on hydrogen, you know, have these detectors to detect them. But there's people that talk about running hydrogen lines to houses, you know, and I'm thinking, my gosh, I don't think we really want this, or gas stations.
Well, I wanted to ask you too, Steve, you know, were you political before you started researching all of this? And then how important is November, you know, to you? Like John and I, we talk about this every week, that this is a crucial election for our country. And I think when it comes to climate change and going green, that not that Republicans don't want that. You know, I want a great society with no pollution. But they always say we don't. But the election is just so, we're just too extreme right now on all of this. So are you political, and what does November
important.
mean to you?
Well, I try not to endorse anybody, but I try to be independent. But this is a very politically charged topic, of course, energy.
Right.
If you look at the expenditures that have been going on. During the Obama administration, we were spending about $15 billion in subsidies per year to wind, solar, biofuels, other things. In President Trump's first term, it went down to about $8 billion. I don't know. We'll see if he gets the second term, $8 billion a year. But under the Biden administration with the Inflation Reduction Act, we're talking $40 to $50 billion a year of money that is being shoveled to all these projects. Everything from carbon dioxide pipelines in Iowa and South Dakota, where many people are fighting them, to all these other offshore wind and all these other things that they're trying to put into place. And we're just doing foolish things that nobody would do without massive subsidies and without the fear of man-made warming. So we really need to get back into something that is common sense. And by the way, if the Republicans are off base on this and they say, well, we've got dangerous climate change, I go after them as well. We really need to get back to, as you say, reducing real pollutants, wastewater and real air pollutants, not carbon dioxide, and get rid of this whole green movement trying to get to net zero carbon dioxide by 2050.
Wow. John, did you have a final? John had a final question.
Yeah,
I
just wanted to ask you. Speaking of the politics side, I'm sure you probably saw the testimony by the cross-country skier expert that the Democrats brought in, and Senator John Kennedy filleted artfully.
Well, that was nutty. I mean, another thing is, again, all these things are against the actual data. Your listeners can go to a thing called the Rutgers University Global Snow Lab and see that snow extent, which is the amount of snow that's on the surface of the Earth. They use satellites to get this data. The snow extent in both North America and Northern Hemisphere has been increasing over the last 40 years in the fall and the winter. It's been declining in the spring, but overall, we've got just as much snow as we always had. So one guy who comes from Alaska and says we don't have enough snow in Alaska, those are not the statistics. He doesn't even know what's going on. And this stuff is spouted in the media like it's fact. We just live in a world of foolishness. And if you hear a story in the media about climate, most likely it is wrong or has many things wrong in it. So people should get my book, Green Breakdown. They should get the Mad World of Climatism. The kids which is a great book for your children. Kids are being taught in school a very one-sided story, which is wrong about all this. They can go to my website, Steve Goreham, GOREHAM.com, and I'll send them a signed copy.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and this is why we keep having you back, Steve, because we've got to educate the masses, and thank you for fighting the fight. We appreciate it always. And don't take my jeans. I'm not giving up jeans.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'd just be happy they'd get a dishwasher and wash dishes,
That's right. Well, thanks again. We've been joined by Steve Goreham, and his book is Green Breakdown, and it's on Amazon.com. So God bless. Have a good weekend. We'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome back to Veronica Live, and we are here with, I've never had somebody call in from this country. I'm going to say country, and we are being joined. I'm super excited about this interview. I met him in January when I was running around the Tallahassee Capitol for the Republican Liberty Caucus, and I was very impressed with this legislator, and we are so pleased to welcome Florida Representative Dr. Joel Rudman from District 3 to Veronica Live for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for having me. It's I'm working on no sleep. I'm overseas, but yet, hey, it's an honor to be on here.
So tell everyone where you are, because when you said you wanted to come on and you were flying away, I was like, oh yeah, this is really going to work. So I'm very impressed that it all worked out. But I was trying to move you, and you're like, no, it's going to work, Veronica. So where are you, Dr. Rudman?
So it's really embarrassing to say this. I hope people don't get the wrong impression. But keep in mind, Veronica, So I've been very fortunate in my life. I've done a lot of things. I used to be a doctor for NASCAR. Now I'm a politician. Some people say I might even be a rock star. So I've been very fortunate in my life. We all have these bucket lists that we keep. Today, I am fulfilling one of the last things on my bucket list. My wife and I, we've been married for 30 years. And one of the places we always wanted to travel to and never got a chance was the Riviera, the Italian Riviera, the French Riviera, Monte Carlo.
Yes.
I know, right? You probably don't like to think of your politicians as being at the casino in Monte Carlo, but it reminds you of all the James Bond movies. For me, actually, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that movie, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Remember that one?
That was not on my bucket list.
yeah, that was the old Steve Martin, Michael Caine movie. They're shysters, they're crooks, and they're hanging out on the French Riviera. So it was, like I said, this was one place my wife and I always wanted to come to, and it's great to be here. And again, you got to cut me some slack. The bucket list means a lot more to you, Veronica, after what I've been through this last year. You probably remember when we spoke in January. I've lived through a shattered kneecap this session, and I also lived through a blood clot in my left leg. Yeah, so I take those bucket lists very seriously nowadays.
Well, we're so happy you're thriving. Plus, you survived another session in Tallahassee of the sausage making. And in January, that was my first experience seeing it up close. And you actually were my favorite politician that I met because you weren't letting people push you around, and that was the attitude that you exuded. So I want people to get to know you, Representative Rudman, because, what is your background and how did you end up in politics? Because I know that's a very interesting story.
So, Veronica, I think that's what most people find appealing about me, actually, is the fact that I don't want to be in Tallahassee. I never had any intention on being a politician. Remember, I'm a family doctor from the rural Florida panhandle. This is not a job that appealed to me, but y'all remember what we went through back in 2020, during the COVID debacle.
Right.
We literally had politicians and bureaucrats stick their noses into my business, the world of medicine. They were locking us down and using a medical excuse for the reason to lock us down. And so when people would ask me on the campaign trail, Veronica, they'd say, why is a doctor getting into politics? I would say, because politics got into medicine. That's why.
Well, and you have already, you're making an impact in Tallahassee. So talk about some of the bills because normally, when you first arrive there, and I've learned this because Representative Griff Griffiths has been on my show probably 20 times. And what I've gathered is that when you're a baby freshman or sophomore, you don't wield the power to get things done. You do what the speaker wants you to do. But you've been, making change and getting things done. So tell us some of the stuff you've worked on.
Well, I think I've been very fortunate to have my tenure overlap with the tenure of probably arguably the best governor in the history of the United States, Governor Ron DeSantis. He understands freedom the way I understand freedom. And so I was just very fortunate, Veronica, that when I entered the legislature, the first thing on my agenda, the first thing on my mind was freeing physicians in the state of Florida. Back during the COVID era, you had people like Tony Fauci. They would criticize us. They would blackball us if we spoke against the whole COVID mantra. If we told people they were going to survive COVID, Fauci said we were liars and we should be excommunicated. So my first priority when I got to the Florida legislature, I ran a bill called the Medical Conscience Bill that said you're not going to force a physician to do anything in their art, anything in their practice that goes against their conscience. And part of that bill included language that said that you cannot punish, chastise, or pull a physician's license based off of his own personal political opinions or his own personal medical opinions. So we literally had doctors across Florida who were being threatened, not by the state of Florida, not by our licensure boards within the state, but by these national boards, the boards that allow us to say that we're board certified. These big national liberal organizations, when we wouldn't toe the company line on COVID, they came for us. And I'm talking, Veronica, literally hundreds of Florida doctors.
Yeah. Well, it was disgusting. So one of my questions I wanted to ask you, so did you actually get some COVID shots? I got 2, and I last year had a blood clot in my leg, and it was not fun. It wasn't the one that would kill you, but, reflecting back, I just don't want anybody to be forced to do anything that they don't want to do or lose their job because of it when it comes to vaccines.
No, you and I are exactly on the same page. I have patients who come in and they ask me, hey, when's the next COVID shot and where can I get it? And I just have to throw my hands up in the air. I say, look, you can do what you want. That's your decision. But I don't know anything about the next COVID shot. I'm not interested in it. We don't stock them here. We don't keep them. But, you can check with your local Walmart. And then, of course, we also have patients on the other end of the spectrum who see the world more like I see it. And they say, look, I'm 36 years old. I'm young. I'm healthy. I don't really need the COVID shot, do I, Dr. Evans? I say, of course you don't need the shot. So, we do have patients from across the political spectrums. But, no, I'm just like you, Veronica. Back in the day, we were basically told that either we get the COVID shot. I actually got the Moderna, right? I got the Series 2
that's
Moderna
the one I got
back in the day.
That's me.
Yeah, because remember, Veronica, back in the day, if you're a doctor who runs a clinic and you didn't get those shots, anytime a COVID patient would walk in your clinic, the government would come in and shut you down for 2 weeks at a time. So as a private physician who's got to keep his doors open, I pretty much made a business decision. It's not that I agreed with it.
Right.
It's just that, hey, this is what I had to do to keep my doors open. And initially, things didn't look that bad. I know after
initially I thought it was a good thing. So now, after last year, I've changed.
Yeah. For a good 6 months, I swore that, hey, okay, maybe this was worth doing. But then, of course, I caught COVID later that year, Veronica, and that really
me
just
too.
kind of flipped the script on me. Yeah. And then, like you,
we're kindred
I'm a young
spirits.
guy with a blood clot.
Yes,
I was in the opposite thing. I'm 69 years old, and I did not get the vaccination. Until I was probably almost a year and a half after it came out, and I had to go to South Korea on a business trip. And I could not get into South Korea unless I had a COVID vaccination.
So he's our JJ guy.
Yeah, so I got the Johnson & Johnson because it was one shot. But I went and got a blood test before I went and got that shot, and I tested negative for the antibody. So I've never had COVID. And it was like, that was my decision to make it. And I didn't like the experimental stuff that was going on. I didn't want somebody experimenting on me and all the crap. When they sit there and they criticize these world-renowned virologists, from Johns Hopkins and all these Stanford, I mean, these people know what they're doing, right? And they were being criticized as being quacks, and it was just astonishing to watch the takedown. But why is it that they use the doctors to do to advance the social stuff, like the gun stuff? It still perplexes me why the government would order doctors to inquire about people's guns, when they come in for a visit. What is
so
it with
true.
trying to use the government or use doctors for this kind of stuff?
That's a fascinating question because it segues right into another one of my bills this session. So apparently long before I got to the legislature, as you were saying, there was this thing about the leftists and the liberals kind of using medicine as a way to push their social agenda. They had doctors asking you, do you have guns in the house? Where do you keep them? And apparently in the state of Florida, in the halls of Tallahassee, that was called docs against Glocks or docs and Glocks, something like that. Well, guess what, guys? This last session, I ran a Second Amendment bill limiting how long your government can withhold your firearm from you, to basically – we're still going to let them do background checks when you purchase a firearm, but they're not going to take longer than 3 business days max. That's a limit that my bill was going to put on those background checks. And guess what, guys? We flipped that whole docs and Glocks thing on its head. We had people roaming the halls of the Capitol say, oh, now it's docs with Glocks. Now you guys are in favor of Glocks.
Well, and that's one of the questions we always ask politicians is, your stance on the red flag laws. And then I saw an interview that you actually toured the Marjorie, what is it? What's the school called,
Marjorie
John?
Stoneman Douglas.
Yes. So I wanted you to talk about that experience. What was that like? And, because my thing, John and I are just huge gun people, and why do they always have to take they want to take my weapons when some wackadoodle that had been arrested 17 times that should have not had a gun, he's the problem, not me. So you toured the school and I guess met with the families. What was that experience like, and how did that change you?
So, boy, that's a really good question, because I think when you look at these questions, Veronica, that we've been going over, there's a common thread through everything we've talked about so far, and that common thread is freedom, it's individual liberties, right? It's personal choice. Kind of like we said with the vaccine. Hey, if you choose to get vaccinated 24 times, God bless you, but I'm not going to.
Right.
But again, I think it's important that we respect each other's boundaries and respect each other's freedoms, and the same is certainly true, as you said, with the Second Amendment. These bills that I run, these beliefs that I have, there's a unifying thread that flows through every bill that I sponsor, and that's protecting the rights of the individual. And like you said, I knew I was going to run this Second Amendment bill, so I wanted to be sure. In my heart, I know I was doing the right thing by running these bills. I know that this was an overreaction on the part of the legislature back in 2018, and who can blame them, right? They just had a tragedy unfold as they're in session. So we're certainly not pointing blame at anyone, but, when you go back with the benefit of hindsight, you look at some of the things that were contained in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, I think it's safe to say, okay, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and as you said, I've toured the facility. I've actually been down to Parkland 3 separate times. And the things that I walk away from Parkland with, Veronica, okay, yes, there were plenty of breakdowns. There were plenty of opportunities to prevent this from happening. But the one thing it wasn't a breakdown of our gun laws. It wasn't a breakdown of the fact that, the killer was below the age of 21. Look, we can't help that. Are we going to say, well, every killer is below the age of 90. Let's ban guns if you're less than 90. I mean, some of these things are just ridiculous. What it was a breakdown of, Veronica, and I'm thoroughly convinced of this, the biggest failure of all at Parkland was a failure to recognize someone in mental distress. This kid or young adult, whatever he was, he never should have been in that school in the first place. Apparently, he was given multiple opportunities, multiple chances, and everyone always knew, hey, that kid's kind of strange. That kid's kind of weird. And apparently, we sometimes as a society, we turn a blind eye to these individuals. In this case, I think even though we're talking about individual freedoms and liberties, right, there are limits. Like, for example, when you break the law, when you're a criminal, don't come crying to me about your individual freedoms and liberties that, I can't be locked up in prison because of my individual liberties. Well, no, you broke society's rules. And in this kid's case, there were multiple things in this kid's background, Veronica, where he should have been in a rubber room for the rest of his life.
And then they want to go after our guns because of his mental illness. So I'm definitely done with it. The other thing, John and I we're Catholic, we're pro-life. We talk about life.
But before we get to
go
that,
ahead,
Veronica,
John.
I wanted to ask about the gun stuff and a related subject, and that's the marijuana laws. We're trying now to make recreational marijuana legal in Florida.
Please don't.
Yeah, and we've talked to some experts, before, and the issue about marijuana related psychosis. Never, and I never hear it come up in the debates in the legislature about legalizing this stuff. Not one word about it. And yet every time you go to these shootings, what's the common factor? Marijuana psychosis, because the kid is out there smoking pot and is going, having psychotic episodes, and then the next thing you know, they're pulling a gun and shooting people. And
well, and not
nobody
to
wants
mention,
that.
it's a gateway drug to everything else. That's the other thing. I mean, we just had the state attorney from our area on, and he's met these criminals. It's definitely the gateway to other things as well.
But is the legislature
John,
look at that stuff?
So, John, you are 100% correct in everything that you just said, and I totally agree with those sentiments. Certainly, as a physician, I see it all day, every day. One of the things I used to do when my kids were little, they're grown now, they're out of the home. But when my kids were teenagers, I would come home from work every evening, and I would grab each one of my two kids, and I would say, look, whatever you do in life, that's all well and good. Just promise me you will never do drugs. Because like you say, marijuana, it is a gateway drug. Yes, it does cause psychosis. I would say, John, that, in my experience as a family practice doctor, when I would see, let's say, for example, a 17-year-old girl, high school girl who comes to see me, let's say that she's there for a psychiatric reason, and let's say on exam that she is just unusually nervous, more anxious than any 17-year-old has a right to be. I would say, John, 100% of the time, when you take a good, thorough history, you will find that these types of patients, they are not just marijuana users, they are heavy marijuana users.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely correct.
Well, so please fight for that because, it's awful.
They don't think of second and third order consequences, of these laws so
you're
often.
Right.
It's
funny. It's funny y'all bring that up. My wife and I, my wife's just as conservative as I am, if not more. Her favorite representative in the Florida Legislature was Representative Tommy Gregory this last session, because Representative Gregory had a bill. He wanted to get in front of this amendment. He wanted to go ahead and put severe restrictions in place in the state of Florida should that amendment pass. And, Representative Gregory did a great job of presenting that bill and debating it. It did pass the Florida House. I was proud to speak alongside Representative Gregory in favor of his bill restricting marijuana limits and that sort of thing in Florida. So, guys, we did try to get ahead of the problem, but let's just pray to God. Let's hope that Floridians are smarter than that. Let's hope they do not pass that awful, awful amendment.
Well, we'll cross our fingers. But back to one of my number one issues that I fight for is life and being pro-life. And Florida's we've led the way, and I always fight for 0 abortions because, it's definitely a human, and you're a doctor. And now the abortion thing, Florida's in the crosshairs again, that, this is one of they hate us for that 6-week abortion ban. So I wanted to hear your thoughts as a doctor, as a Catholic, as a pro-lifer, and representing Florida, where we need to be on this abortion issue. I'm sorry, I don't like rape, but this is a baby, and we know now. Ultrasounds are incredible. What people can see when it comes to life. So your thoughts, Doc?
So, wow, we were just talking about one awful amendment, and now we're talking about an even worse amendment, this Amendment 4. And again, guys, I think as good practicing Catholics, which my wife and I are, I think we all need to get together. I think we need to pray from here on out all the way to Election Day that hopefully Floridians are smarter than that. I got to be honest with you, we honestly thought, or at least speaking for myself, I honestly thought I wouldn't have to worry about this amendment. The way the language was written, it was purposely deceitful and vague. And, my wife and I, we both witnessed volunteers at the local DMV in Gulf Breeze, Florida. I think we went in to get a new car tag or something, and you had these radical activists standing outside the DMV, collecting signatures. And, of course, they didn't know who I was, but they're shouting across the parking lot, hey, would you like to sign a petition protecting women's health? Now, guys, if that's not deceptive, I don't know what is. The petition has nothing to do with safeguarding women's health. It has everything to do with murdering innocent babies. So, and then, of course, the language of the amendment itself is kind of confusing, kind of vague. But, guys, listen, my wife and I, we've been talking about this. I have already started drafting language. Should the unforgivable happen, should the unthinkable happen, and Floridians fall for this terrible amendment, I'm going to go ahead and start drafting language because, the argument they use, Veronica, they say, well, these are medical decisions. No one wants an abortion, but this is necessary for the safety of the mother. Well, Veronica, John, between us right here, I've been a physician since 1996. I've delivered over 100 babies in my lifetime. I've never once encountered one of these nightmare scenarios that they say is just commonplace. Oh, it happens every day, happens all the time. I've never encountered that nightmare scenario where I've had to tell an expectant mother, Mom, we're going to have to terminate your pregnancy in order to save your life. It just doesn't happen, guys.
Right.
Maybe it happened back to the 1800s, but we are now well into the 21st century. These Sophie's Choice scenarios, they just don't occur anymore. And I would love to propose legislation properly defining exactly what does health of the mother mean. Let's define it, and let's define it in terms where no abortion's ever going to be permitted in the state of Florida.
Well, and what's sad is that Kamala Harris has made this the White House's number one issue.
Yeah, and it was odd that the three women on the state Supreme Court voted, against the ballot language, saying it was vague and deceptive, and reading it, it's like they don't even talk about licensed physicians; they just talk about healthcare providers. A good example, and it was the men that said, yeah, let's put it on the ballot that it's not vague and simple subject.
Well, John, that's a good point. The other side, for better or for worse, these are the tactics that are used by the other side. They bait people, they name call, they stigmatize people. Did that weigh into some of these male Supreme Court justices' opinions? Did they not want to be called a misogynist or a sexist? I don't know. That's probably a question better asked of them. But I think Veronica can tell you. They can throw all the names in the book at me. I could honestly care less. I don't need this job. Matter of fact, this job is hurting my full-time job, which is taking care of patients in Navarre, Florida. So they can come at me as hard as they want. As Veronica said earlier, I'm not going to back down. And I think that's what scares them to death, is that they know they don't control me.
I love that.
And that's what we need more of. We need legislators with backbone that will stand up to these people. Because so much of what goes on in the legislature is written by the lobbyists and the special interest, and you need people that'll stand up to this stuff.
Well, and let me tell you guys, even though it's an honor to be here and to talk to you, I don't stand alone in the legislature. Veronica, you mentioned a mutual friend of ours who stands tall as well, Representative Griffith. He's an outstanding representative. I'm honored to have him by my side. And we also have other Republican champions in my class. Again, we're all freshmen, but man, are we carrying the load. And it's only going to get better the longer we hang around. As you said, as we work our way up the hierarchy, we have the potential to really do some transformative change in the state of Florida. It's one of those things. Republican leadership is certainly a great thing, and certainly the Republicans in the state of Florida have done a great job of steering the ship. But we're ready to grab the wheel. We're ready to take charge. We're ready for our shift. And among people like myself and Representative Griffith, I want to give a shout out to people like Representative Cayenne Michael. If you don't know Representative Michael's story, look her up. She's someone who lost a child to the hands of an illegal immigrant. So she is devoting her public service to make certain that no other family has to go through the trauma and the tragedy that she did. There's Representative Kevin Steele from Central Florida. He's a businessman like me. He probably had no intention of starting a second career in politics, but yet, like me, government was getting involved in his business. And people like Kevin Steele and I, we're fighting back. There's Bernie Jacques, a prosecutor down there in the Tampa St. Pete Clearwater area, who is a strong conservative. And then, of course, there's my friend Representative Jennifer Kennedy, who was one of the co-sponsors of that House Bill 7. And I was proud to stand with Representative Kennedy on that heartbeat bill, and I was proud to co-sponsor it as well. But we've got a whole bumper crop of freshmen who are ready to ascend the throne, ready to take the wheel, and you're just going to see some really transformative things in the next 6 years in the state of Florida.
So I gather you're supporting the term limit idea, and it seems to me, looking back at the history of the Florida Legislature, that it seems to be working well, because we're getting people in there that are not lifetime legislators. They're there to do a service, and then they're gone.
So the funny thing, Johnny, the term limits kind of cuts both ways. Obviously, I'm in favor of term limits. I think it's a great thing. But I'm also an impatient man. As a doctor, when you work emergency rooms, and someone's got chest pain, you don't say, well, let's stew on this for 3 days and see how we feel in the morning and see how we feel. When there's an emergency, when there's a crisis, we're used to taking immediate, decisive action. So the only problem with term limits as it exists right now in the state of Florida is that you do kind of have this hierarchy. People expect, once they're there, Yep. They expect to serve 4 terms in the House, and so it creates kind of like a high school system. And as Veronica explained earlier, I'm basically a freshman in that hierarchy. Well, look, I don't want to be a freshman. Time's a wasting. Like I said earlier, I've survived a blood clot and a shattered knee. I don't know how many years I have left. I don't know if I have 6 years left. So the changes I would like to make them today. So I almost wish, John, that, hey, okay, I'm in favor of term limits, but maybe we should have term limits of just 1 term in each chamber.
Well, that's always been one of the problems I've viewed in the legislature is one person can stop a common sense thing, and it, like Senate President Pasademo, now, and she just lost her husband in a hiking accident, I think last week or the past few days. But our prayers go out to her and her family. But she alone has blocked the open carry gun.
Well, and when I was up there in January, people were not a fan. They said she was not pro Second Amendment and election integrity.
Right. She single-handedly, and I've talked to the Senate presidents and a number of senators. She single-handedly blocked it, and nobody would go against her.
And imagine if people were only there for 1 term. And right now in the Senate, you can serve 8 years, which would be 2 terms. In the Florida House, you can serve 4 consecutive terms, which would be 8. Basically, it's 8 years in either chamber. Imagine the sense of urgency people would have, John, if they had 1 shot. You get 1 term, and that's it. If you have bold ideas, you better fight like heck for them this session, because you're not going to get another shot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to ask you too, Representative, about, I saw out on the web that you are pro expanding Florida's Medicaid. So I wanted you to talk on that and why you want that expansion.
Absolutely. So guys, again, being a physician, there's several things that really should not be a partisan issue, right? There's several things that every red-blooded Americans should be able to agree on. You would think the Second Amendment, if something's in the Bill of Rights, you would think certainly this is inarguable. Everyone should appreciate your Bill of Rights. When it comes to health care, right, we have to do the right thing. And what we're facing right now, Veronica and John, we're facing a financial decision. Every state has a government program that each state runs individually. It's called the Medicaid program. It's for the poor. It's for the indigent. It's for the permanently disabled. Now, I know a lot about Medicaid because I am the guardian of my older sister who's in her 60s. She is on Florida Medicaid. She has had daily seizures since she was 5 years old. Something happened to her at age 5 where she has never basically progressed since age 5. So there are mental issues. There are emotional issues. Someone has to care for her. So I am her guardian. We moved her from the state of Mississippi. She was under the care of my parents until they passed away. And guys, just moving my sister, there is no doubt that she's permanently disabled. The federal government has declared her disabled since she was 8 years old. She's now 61. Just moving her from Mississippi to Florida, she was without insurance for 9 months. It took 9 months for the state of Florida to confirm and evaluate her and to interview her and to put her on the Medicaid rolls. So when I, as a physician and as a caregiver, when I see 41 other states basically accept free money from the federal government to expand their programs and expand their services, I do have to question why the state of Florida is one of the 9 holdouts. And guys, I know it's too complicated to get into in a show format such as this, but basically holding out from Medicaid expansion has actually benefited us, believe it or not, because you know what the feds have done? Those remaining 9 states, they keep upping the ante. They keep offering more incentives. The most recent Republican state to accept expansion, to accept the federal dollars, was North Carolina. And in addition to taking those federal funds and covering, I think, in the neighborhood of 400 to 600,000 poor and indigent people in the state who were going without insurance, they also got an additional, I believe it was an additional $1.8 billion from the feds to do with as they will. You know, they didn't have to necessarily spend it on Medicaid patients. I think in the state of North Carolina, they're using it to build more hospitals. So again, I think at this point, it's a financial decision for the state of Florida. It's not an ideological decision. At this point, it would be like being against Social Security. Look, I don't like Social Security. I'm not a huge fan of Medicare myself. I would love to privatize everything that the government has their hands in, but at some point we have to be pragmatic. Social Security is never going away. We have to admit that. Medicare is never going away, at least not in my lifetime. Too many people have paid into that. Well, now we're looking at Medicaid, and with what happened with Medicaid in 2011, initially we thought, okay, well, this isn't going to last. Well, now 13 years later, I think it's safe to say that Medicaid expansion is basically the law of the land now. And like Social Security and Medicare, it is also never going away. So at this point, for the feds to offer us dollars that if we turn them down, it's not like we get a refund, guys. You know, did anyone get their Medicaid denial refund check in the mail last year? I know I haven't. I haven't gotten one for 13 years. When we turn down free federal money, the feds take those taxpayer dollars from Florida taxpayers. They don't refund them. They send them to places like California and Oregon, so that those states.
So I assume, Representative Rudman, that you've told this story. Hearing your story, I'm sure you've shared it with Governor DeSantis, because when you hear this story about your sister, that changes my heart on this. I have to say.
Yeah, but you know, Veronica, you got the other side of that too, and I'll make the case for that. And that with that Medicare expansion comes a lot of strings that are not paid for by the federal government that obligates the citizens of the state of Florida to pay for it. And therefore the budget.
So John, I hate to be a rude guest, but I'm going to stop you right there.
That's okay.
That is actually misinformation. You're using talking points that are 10 years old. Now you're talking to a physician, right, who sees Medicaid patients. I've got someone on Medicaid in my family. Those were the old talking points from 2011. People were afraid that the states were going to be on the hook. We are now 13 years into this. This is no longer an experiment. This is the law of the land. The feds are never going to pull that rug out from us. Now, you are correct. The deal with Medicaid expansion, the feds give you 90% of the money to do the expansion. You have to make up the other 10%. Now, what we're learning, John, what conservative states are doing, states like Louisiana and North Carolina, they are not raising taxes. They are not raiding the coffers from other programs, from infrastructure or places like that to pay the 10%. Do you know what they're doing, John? They're asking the state's hospital to pony up the remaining 10%. And do you know what they're doing in Louisiana and North Carolina? The hospitals are happy to, because with expansion, they're no longer seeing deadbeats. They're no longer giving, ER care to the tune of $50,000 to these indigents, knowing that they're never going to see a dime of it. These people are now covered by Medicaid. So hospitals, they're no longer seeing all this uncompensated, all this uninsured care. They are making so much money on the deal that they are happy, John, to pony up that remaining 10%. So you were right. There is a cost involved, but that cost is not going to be borne by Florida taxpayers. It's going to be borne by our state's hospital. And we could also, like I said, with the incentives they're offering, we could turn around and use that incentive money as the 10%. But again, those are decisions above my pay grade. As Veronica said, that's where you got to get the governor involved. That's where you got to get the the executive branch involved to figure out, are we going to do this, and if so, how?
Well, it's definitely a complex and very dynamic, because you not only with the Medicare expansion, you also had that phenomena now of physician practices being bought up by hospitals and these huge chains that are you're losing your individual doctors. Go try and find an independent pharmacist anymore, because everything's being bought up by CVS and Walgreens and everything else. So that you had this huge consolidation going on, and the cost shifting, and frankly, the hospitals are making money hand over fist, as you pointed out, in these other states, and could probably afford some of this stuff.
Well, and the thing is, trust me, I'm no supporter of the hospital politics. That's why I'm in private practice. No one owns my practice. I run it myself. But the hospitals, as far as I know, John, I can't think of any other business. I can't think of any lawyer. I can't think of any accountant who, when a person walks in off the street with an awful tax return or an awful legal case, I can't think of any other occupation that has to provide the service to that person regardless of their ability to pay. But yet we make our hospitals do that. And so when I work these rural emergency rooms, I've worked places like Atmore, Alabama. I've worked places like Chipley, Florida, places where, 6 out of every 10 ER patients that I see, they have absolutely no insurance. So that $50,000 bill I'm handing them, the hospital's having to.
I guess my problem is I live in some kind of fantasy that I think it could be that the medical system can be fixed. That the government distortion of the pricing mechanism is possible to fix that. Maybe like I said, it's a fantasy that because we have friends of ours that are doctors and stuff, and I talked to them about the reimbursement stuff being, it's just it's completely disconnected from reality. They depend on private insurance companies are actually footing the bill. People that are paying, companies and people that have private insurance are actually the ones paying for all of this stuff through these huge charges. And then, every time I get a bill from a hospital or anything, it says, here's, and then look what the insurance company paid. It's like $20,000, was the bill from the hospital. The insurance company negotiates it down to $1,200. So what's the real cost?
That was my new need 2 years ago.
Right. Is it just so distorted that you can't apply any kind of reality, some kind of norms to this problem?
Well, and John, that you're absolutely correct. And to underline, right, to highlight what you just said, I'm going to bring this back into the political arena. So back in the day when I made the decision to go to medical school, you probably remember these days, guys. You'd go to the doctor and, okay, maybe your visit was $100, and half the time you just rip out your check and write the check for $100. There's no big deal. Yep. Well, that was in the day of what was called usual and customary fees. That was back when doctors set the rates, and they would honestly tell you, look, this was just a strep throat. I'll take $25. What happened, John, under the Bill Clinton administration, Bill Clinton changed how Medicare treated physicians. Instead of us sending Medicare the bill every time we saw an elderly patient with Medicare, Bill Clinton said, no, Medicare is going to set the rate. And you know what the rate's going to be? The rate's going to be a fraction of what these doctors asked for. So, John, you can imagine your country doctor who asked for $25, that was literally all he needed for that strep throat. That would literally pay his bills. But then when he asked Medicare for $25 in the Clinton era, Medicare would say, okay, we're going to take our 80% discount off of that, so you now get $2. And that's where you see this huge disconnect. It all started with the Bill Clinton administration, and certainly the Obama administration continued these policies. Again, they want Medicare to set the rates, and every other insurance, they take their lead from whatever Medicare does. So that's why you see these awful, awful bills, from hospitals that say you owe them $100,000, and then you look at what they actually get, and they get somewhere along the lines of $20,000. Because if they asked for $20,000, they would get $2.
So Doc, what are
is it fixable?
Right.
So again, John, I like to tell people that I'm pragmatic. you are 100% right that it needs to be fixed. And John, I know we're running short on time here. It almost was fixed. Under the George Bush era, you had physicians going to accepting cash only, and you still have that in some communities. When I opened my practice back in 2004, 2005, everyone in Navarre said, you don't need to take insurance. You should just take cash only. That way you could lower your prices. You won't have the overhead. You won't be fighting with insurance companies. You won't have to pay a billing company. So believe it or not, the system was moving away from insurance, John, in the late 2000s. But guess what happened? Obamacare happened, where they passed that law requiring every American to carry insurance or pay a fine. So we were headed in the right direction until Obama took office, and we all know what he did, and that's where we went astray. And so I'm with you, John, but do I think there's any way of going back? In my opinion, if we were going to go back and fix it, we had the chance under Trump when we had a Republican Congress and a Republican president, and we still couldn't get it done. So at the end of the day, I have to be pragmatic and work with the system I'm in. I wish we could blow it up and start over, and I would certainly be in favor of that. But for right now, I've got to work with the system I've got. And for me, it's, hey, if Biden's going to throw federal taxpayer dollars at places like New Hampshire and Massachusetts, if he's going to send Florida taxpayer money to Maine and California, I'd rather that Florida taxpayer money stay here in the state of Florida and insure more Floridians.
I love it. So what are we missing, Representative Rudman? We could talk to you all day, and
I know, right?
You're wonderful, which I've been dreaming about this interview.
Here, so the weather here, I'm actually up in George Clooney country. I'm up here by Lake Como, and the weather was supposed to be like 40 degrees, but the sun's out. It's 80 degrees. I'm wearing jeans and a long button-down shirt. So I'm about to go hang out by the pool. But you know what, guys? Let me leave you with this last thought. So like I said, my wife and I, we like to travel. We like to see how other people live across the world. Guys, let me tell you, more people need to get out and see the world, because as soon as you leave the United States and you see how these other citizens in other countries live, you will come back and you will kiss the ground of the United States when you land. Because, guys, like I said, I'm up here in George Clooney country. I'm looking out my hotel window, and there are hovels out here. There are abandoned buildings. There are torn up fences. The liberals like to tell us that we're the only country with infrastructure problems and we're the only country with poverty. That is not true. I am in Italy right now, and even though I'm in probably the richest part of Italy, out my back door, it looks like a third world country. I would not trade Navarre, Florida for this. I would not trade any part of Florida for Italy, for France, for Germany. I just wouldn't. And anyone who tells you that Europe does it better, ask them if they've ever visited Europe, because I don't think they have. I don't know. My wife and I were talking about that this afternoon when we were walking around the village here. We're like, these liberals, they want us to live like, I'm looking out and I'm looking at apartment buildings. I'm looking at these individual, in our country, we call them projects, because they're so small and they're so built one on top of the other. To think that an entire village lives like this, and they're in different states of disrepair. I would encourage people, don't listen to the liberals. When you have these Hollywood types get on TV and tell you, oh, France does it better, Italy does it better, we should all learn a lesson from Europe. No. The lesson we learned from Europe is that we had to go bail them out in World War II. They should be taking lessons from us because we are the last bastions of freedom on earth. And no, we're not changing to benefit Europe. We're going to keep doing what we're doing to benefit Floridians and all of America.
Well, it's been a pleasure. We are going to have you back. And I told John earlier, after meeting you and researching you, I want you to run for Congress. So I'm going to start that here. Tell your wife I'll be your campaign manager. And because we need you, Doc. I mean, you've been fabulous. And I just love how you're fighting for us.
System. Yeah, we need people like you to help get up there and fix the system.
Guys, I tell you what, I'll leave you with this last thought. I think when you're talking to people across the state or across the country, I think the key is if you have someone who is running for office for the wrong reasons, if you have someone who's not willing to walk away from the job. Y'all remember all the great Republicans we've had in Congress over the last 20 years. You'll get people like Trey Gowdy, and all of a sudden they'll just say, okay, I'm done.
Right.
Those are exactly the kind of people you need. You need people who are willing to go to the mat. And you know what? This is not my life. This is not my career. I'm here to fight for my state. I'm here to fight for my country. But I'm not here to fight for the job, because the job sucks. The job is, like you say, it's the sausage getting made. And any person who wants to kick and scream and use negative campaigning and use lies and innuendo to win a position, those are not the people you want representing you. You want the people who really don't want to be in Washington. You want the people like Matt Gaetz, who really doesn't want to be there. You want people like me, people who don't want to be in Tallahassee, but we're serving your interests. We're there because we know if we're not there, there's going to be no one left to stand up for you. So help me keep Republicans in power in Tallahassee. Help us keep a supermajority in Tallahassee, because those friends of mine I mentioned earlier, the Kevin Steeles of the world, the Bernie Jacques of the world, the Cayenne Michaels of the world, you'll notice they are all Republican, and Lord knows I need them back next session. So please help me with that, guys.
Well, God bless you. We've been speaking with Florida Representative Dr. Joel Rudman from District 3 and live from Italy. So ciao, and we'll have you back, sir.
Ciao, Bella.
We'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here with our next guest this morning, and it is attorney Daniel Street. He is an author. He lives in Louisiana, and he's written 3 books called Fake News Exposed about Trump that are on Amazon. And welcome to the show, Daniel.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing. I know you're a Louisiana guy. I was harassing you yesterday in text, because my husband's a Louisiana texter, but we love the LSU folks too. So tell us about all your background and what you do in Louisiana.
Sure. Well, I have a degree in history from Louisiana State University, and then went to LSU's law schools, the Paul M. Hebert Law Center, and got my law degree back in 1996. I've been in private practice ever since, primarily virtually exclusively civil litigation. I do handle an occasional criminal case. And, I got into writing. I've actually been a writer all my life, and just got into political commentary and political writing in the last 3 or 4 years, and really in the Trump era. And I have to tell you now, where I live is in North Louisiana, about 20 minutes from Ruston, but everybody in my hometown in Monroe, we're ULM, what used to be Northeast or NLU fans. So we have a rivalry with Tech. So no kind words for Tech, except that it's a great school, but I'm always pulling for their athletic side to lose to us.
Yeah. Oh, there you have it. Well, anyways, Trump he's the man of the hour, and you've actually written 3 incredible books because there is so much fake news, Daniel. So how did you end up writing about Trump? I mean, obviously you were a Trumper, and as a lawyer, you're a critical thinker. So take it away.
Well, I've always followed politics. I've always followed it carefully. I was as a child, an admirer of the late President Ronald Reagan. So I knew way back then, when I was a kid, I knew that the media was biased against President Reagan, and then ultimately just biased against Republicans. And I kind of carried that forward through my adult life. And when Donald Trump announced, when he came down the escalator at Trump Tower, I saw the media just go into an absolute frenzy attacking President or then candidate Trump. But what I also noticed is the GOP establishment, the Republican establishment, piled on as well. So I started taking notes. I started keeping up with the misinformation, and it literally started as a hobby. Let me see what they're saying today, and then I started compiling the data and compiling what the truth was. And I eventually had so many stories. I said, I could write a book about this, and I wound up writing 3. And to be honest with you, I could write 10 because there's that much misinformation that's peddled by the media about Donald Trump.
So, one of your books, you talk, the latest one about January 6th and the insurrection. And, John and I talk about this all the time. And I guess this week, this grandmother that was praying now is going to be going to prison. I mean, it's just been so out of control. So talk about, to our listeners, why January 6th wasn't an insurrection. We've had guests on here that were actually there. We've seen videos and people were saying the pledge and singing. And, if somebody held the door open to the Capitol, I would have walked through it, Daniel.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't blame you. I will say, back when the protests were being planned, I told everybody I knew, everybody who asked for my opinion, I said, don't go, because D.C. is such a really unfair jurisdiction for Republicans or conservatives. But listen, the most important thing about January 6th for people to remember is the events of January 6th may have constituted, in fact, in part constituted a riot. It was not an insurrection. Period. I covered that. I got an entire chapter of one of my books dedicated to that, and there's a host of reasons for it. But consider this: there have been over 1,000 people associated with January 6th and the episodes and the events that occurred on January 6th. Not one of those people has been charged under the federal insurrection statute. And let me say that again: not one has been charged under the federal insurrection statute. And the reason for that is the government cannot prove that an insurrection occurred. Now, there's a host of reasons for that. Primary among them is federal law has contained a consistent definition of insurrection since the Militia Act of 1795 and the Insurrection Act of 1807. The current embodiment of those statutes still exists. You'd be shocked how similar the language is. But an insurrection actually requires a declaration by the President of the United States directed to the people or entities or organizations that are in an uprising against the United States, giving those people the opportunity to stand down by X time. And so that's actually an executive proclamation. Of course, nothing like that happened in this case. There was no insurrection. And as a practical matter, if you consider like the Webster's dictionary definition of insurrection, this wasn't an insurrection. So what I tell everybody is January 6th was a lot of things. It was not an insurrection, and it certainly wasn't an armed insurrection. I actually cover that in a chapter of one of my books as well. So almost everything the American people have been told by legacy media about the events of January 6th has been propaganda and misinformation. And that includes the United States. I should include the United States Department of Justice.
So, I mean, my thing is, why is it taking so long to get all of the videos I've seen? I mean, people were just strolling through the Capitol, taking selfies with the Capitol Police, and they weren't doing anything crazy.
Yeah, well, good question. There's thousands and thousands of hours of video. Part of the reason no one was able to obtain the vast majority of it is because when the Democrats controlled the United States House of Representatives, and here in recent times, Nancy Pelosi was the speaker, and essentially the U.S. House majority held sway over those videos. And so you had this little game between the executive branch, which would be the Department of Justice, and the legislative branch over who had the videos. And then you get in this dispute about, in a criminal case, so a criminal defendant's charged and says, hey, look, I want these videos produced. Well, the United States Department of Justice said for years, we don't have them. The legislative branch has those videos. We don't have any dominion over them. So they played this little cat and mouse game. And when it finally ended several months after the Republicans took the House back, and now the videos have been released. Another reason that the Republican majority, when the Republicans gained the majority in the House, they didn't immediately release all the videos, is because there are groups of leftists that are using the videos to hunt down people who were at January 6th events that are yet to be identified and yet to be charged by the government. So that scenario altogether is what really held it all up.
I mean, just going fast forward, I really hope Trump wins in November, and I hope all of these people are pardoned, and so many of their lives have been ruined. and I want them to get some compensation from the government. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Having researched this, do you not feel that this was just baloney? I mean, we had a guest on that said he felt he was there and that there was definitely plants that were pretending to be Trumpers, and they were more there to instigate, some sort of riot.
Look, I've said for probably the last year that I've been talking about this, that when all the truth comes out, when all the facts are ultimately disclosed, and we will get them eventually, we will find that with respect to the people who were engaged in the nastiness on January 6th, the people who were destroying property and the people who were instigating riots and all that, we'll find that virtually all those people, if not all of them, were either Antifa, federal law enforcement assets or confidential informants, or local law enforcement assets and confidential informants. This was a big setup, in my opinion. And I've actually investigated it, certainly more than most people. But I will say, before what's happened to all the January 6 people, and I mean the people charged with January 6 violations, with so many of them held without bail, and for years in many cases, I would have told the people of this country, if you brought me on the show 3 years ago, I would have said, that can't happen here. I would have promised everybody it couldn't happen. I didn't think it was possible. So what has happened to January 6 defendants has redefined my personal view as a lawyer and what the law is and what is possible and not possible. And I agree with you completely that in the vast, overwhelming majority of cases, the January 6, the people charged with violations, criminal violations arising out of January 6, have there's no basis for the vast majority of it. And hopefully they get not only pardoned, but as you indicated, compensated for their being victimized by the federal government.
Yeah, we had the author of a book on letters from the January 6 prisoners on about a month
American
ago.
Chronicles.
Oh yeah, and you read it's the actual letters from these prisoners that they've sent out, and you read this and you wonder what kind of third world country we live in some cases. I want to ask you about the press specifically, because you've got this really strange dichotomy with the press. They can't help themselves when it comes to covering Trump. In the political world that I'm in, it's called earned media. It's a good thing. The press covers you, and you don't have to pay anything for it. But they seem to have this compulsion that they have to cover him, they have to report on him, and they have to try to find some negative aspect of whatever he's saying. And it's astonishing the breadth of the press. And these are people, and I'm talking about people that have known Donald Trump for decades, and yet they attack him as a liar, as a some kind of crazy. And I know that they know better. And I've heard so many people talk about the other Donald Trump, the Donald Trump that cares about people, that goes up and shakes the hand of the policeman that's in the line there for his protective detail or whatever, or call somebody that lost a family member, and offers his condolences, unsolicited, just calls them. There's a human side to Donald Trump that these reporters, you read about all this stuff and it says he's a liar, he's and all this kind of stuff, and it's like he can't be both. He can't possibly be both. So what is it with this weaponization where the government, we've got the Justice Department, the intel agencies, and everything from the Democrats all aligning with the press to come in to try and destroy one person like this? What's going on here?
Well, my theory on that is this. Any time, whether you're talking about, in this case, we're talking about government and politics, but whether you're talking about business, industry, the arts, government, whatever, anytime someone comes in and shakes things up and totally remakes the paradigm, the model for way things are to be done, and really upsets the powers that be in the status quo. Anytime that happens, whoever has their fingers on the trigger, their finger on the button of power, is going to react viscerally, and they're going to, overreact and be reactionary and attack. And that's my theory on the reason that there's this kind of organized opposition, vitriolic opposition to President Trump, because he's a person that's changing the way that business is done in Washington. And really, more than anything, what that pertains to is America first, because for probably 50 years, maybe longer than that, arguably, both from economic policy, tax policy, foreign policy, our leadership has led just the opposite. It's America last, and how can everybody on earth take advantage of America? And President Trump came in and said, look, we're going to do things different, and I'm going to renegotiate NAFTA. For instance, President Obama ran in 2008 on renegotiating NAFTA. It was in the North American Free Trade Agreement itself that it could be renegotiated, that parties could leave it with a 90-day notice and blah, blah, blah. He said he was going to do it. He never did. Donald Trump said he was going to do it. He immediately did. And he did the same things with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, if you remember that. So what President Trump said is, we're not going to be taken advantage of, not by NATO, not by the Chinese, not by Canada and Mexico or anybody else. And that unified all of these diverse, disparate interests against him. That's my theory about why there's so much unanimity amongst media, leftist media, government, and industry, in many cases against President Trump.
It's almost like they're irrational. I mean, you just, and when you offer any kind of counterfactual to them, they seem to lose their mind. I mean, it's an astonishing thing to watch.
So
I agree with you, and I'll tell you that a lot of it too. If you think about media, particularly legacy media, the big media, New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, those newsrooms are so far left that people like you and me really can't fathom it. And look, there's a lot of people who believe that form of leftism is actually a mental illness. And if you remember when Senator Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton, a United States senator from Arkansas, was allowed. They published, New York Times published an op-ed from him back during the George Floyd riots back in 2020. And this is a sitting United States senator who's just talking about quelling the riots and whatnot. That was such a revolutionary act. You remember that the staff writers at the New York Times forced the editorial editor out of the newspaper. All right, just for allowing an op-ed to be published by a sitting conservative Republican United States senator. That's how far left those people are. So it's hard for us an average person to even understand or fathom their mentality.
Well, we saw it when they, all of their broadcasters had a meltdown when they hired Ronna McDaniel. Then they had to fire her the next day. So there's no fair and balanced anything. But I wanted to ask you, because you are a lawyer, and John and I have talked, about all of these court cases, and then I was so worried when Trump was going to have to pay $400 million. I was ready to write checks, send money, and my little $100. And I was very thankful that the appellate court woke up, but and lowered it to $175 million. I mean, you're a lawyer, and then John and I've talked about Fannie, and then she doesn't even she's sleeping with the guy she's hired, and she just gets a slap on the hand, and it just. As a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm looking at these court systems that's supposed to be law and order, and they're, for justice. And there's just been no justice at all. And thank you, Jesus, for that appellate court in New York that lowered the money bond. So how do you see it? This is your world. I mean, I'm so disgusted by these people.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, the damage that the Biden regime and the Democrats in these big cities like Manhattan, New York and in Atlanta, talking there about the DA, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan and Fonnie Willis in Fulton County, Georgia, and then the special counsel, the United States Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney General, the damage that these groups of people have done to the law to the respect and honor that the people of this country have in the law, and to the confidence that the people of this country have in the fair, balanced, and even-handed application of the law. It would take 30 years of doing things the right way to regain that lost credibility. I have to tell you what I've seen waged against President Trump. I expect it from some radical leftist group that files a lawsuit over blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's an outlier. But this is the United States Department of Justice. And then you've got the Manhattan DA and you've got a DA in Fulton County. That's the equivalent of my local DA charging President Biden with something. It's just ludicrous. It's so above the pay grade of these people in Georgia and New York, in my opinion. And it's,
right.
I will say it's a dark time in the not just the practice of law, but just for the law and for the rule of law and for the confidence the people of this country have in the law.
It's almost become like a roulette, depending on where you live at, how the law will be applied to you, what your politics are, which, I never thought I would, I'm 69. Okay. I've been around a little while. I've never seen anything like it. And my opinion of the law in the last 2 years has changed radically. I mean, radically. I would never live in a state like New York or California, because if I ever got caught doing anything, in the politics or any aspect of it, it doesn't matter, that you're guilty. And I keep wondering where are the adults? When are the adults going to show up and restore order to this system? And, it's like the appeals court stuff, it's like Trump, this judge, a judge finds him guilty, no chance to defend himself whatsoever, makes an outrageous, there's nobody defrauded, okay? There's no victims.
That's right.
And yet he finds him guilty of fraud.
I mean, I'm scared to death, Daniel,
right,
and I've lived in a third
lost,
world country, and this
right,
is how their law systems are.
Right. Nobody lost any money, and yet he gets fined, $500 million. And it's like, oh, by the way, you can't appeal unless you put up a bond of $500 million.
Well, and on top of that, he can't do business in New York City.
Right, in New York.
His children can't do. They've been fined $4 million each. Their hands are tied. I mean, we are banana republic fully. I'm so distraught, and I'm not even a lawyer.
But where are the adults to come in and say that this is not the way American justice works?
Well, good question. The hope is that there's some adults in the higher courts in New York. You've been talking about the Court of Appeal reducing that bond from $465 to $175 million, which is still an outrageous bond, in my opinion. But the other thing that the Court of Appeal did too that has been missed by the media and just not reported on by the media, the Court of Appeal stayed every other aspect of that judge's ruling, of Judge Erdogan's ruling, except for the monitoring of the businesses. So that thing about, the Trump organization can't apply for loans to banking institutions in New York, and the Trumps can't serve as officers, and all of that got stayed by the Court of Appeal. And I can tell you, I've been a lawyer now for 27 and a half years. That is an extraordinary measure for a Court of Appeal to take. So, now, it was an extraordinary judgment in the first place, but the Court of Appeal said, wait a minute, we're going to stop all of this until we get a chance to look at it. So hopefully, just common sense, decency, equity, and the rule of law will prevail there in New York. But I think that the fundamental thing that I try to mention every time that case comes up, I wrote about that case on my Substack. I wrote about the excessiveness of the fines under the Eighth Amendment to the United States Constitution. But the most important thing for people to remember is what the court ordered there was disgorgement. And disgorgement is ordering a party to give up profits. And the reason they're wanting President Trump and the Trump organization to give up profits is because there were no people who lost any money. In fact, all of the lenders were paid back. They were paid back on time, and they all made money and said they would love to do business with the Trump organization moving forward. There were no victims in that case. And all the claims is that President Trump and his team overvalued these different properties, the value of the asset. But no one got harmed by that. And that's a debatable point.
I agree. Agree.
No one got harmed. And that's, anytime I talk about this, so let's start with this. Nobody got harmed. The court couldn't order President Trump or the Trump organization to compensate anybody because no one lost any money. In fact, they all made money. So that really encapsulates how unfair and how really just how the law was turned on its head by the Attorney General in New York and that New York District Court, or what they call a Supreme Court in New York, but it's a district court.
Well, that's the part that surprised me, because it's like they're saying, okay, so you have to there's the restitution aspect, which is what they're claiming, and yet the money goes to the state of New York, which wait a minute, the state of New York was not harmed, so is it a fine? But wait, you can't.
They're fleecing Trump for money
that much, So I mean, they're just twisting the law to make it unrecognizable almost.
That's right. And you see that in case after case after case in which President Trump has been targeted. Look, even Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida, I'm sure y'all are well familiar with him. He wrote an op-ed in the, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, and said, look, there's not a case under this particular statute, this persistent fraud statute, the New York statute they were using to target President Trump. He said, there's not a case reported in which there were no victims, no financial victims. And that's true. I pointed that out. And actually, in the Substack I wrote, I said, look, because I didn't Google, I searched it on a legal database. It pulled up every single case citing that statute. There's not a single one. And there's only about 56 is my recollection. There wasn't a single case in which there were no financial victims. This is what we call a matter of first impression. It's the first time anyone had been targeted in that fashion, and we see that over and over again. In the documents case against President Trump down in Florida, the federal indictment, in the D.C. indictment, in the Fulton County. In Fulton County, no one's ever been charged. No RICO, this is Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization Act prosecution has ever been made against people who did not have a criminal enterprise intended to deprive people of property and things. Never been done before. So we have all of these we call it res nova, which is a new thing in the law. These issues of first impression that have never been done against anybody, all coordinated at the same time in courts all over the country against President Trump.
Well, and we've had to learn the word lawfare. That's our new word of the last 2 weeks, lawfare. And I mean, they've been mentioning the court case in Florida is going to be moving forward. So like now I'm nervous about that one, and I'm with John. Where are the damn adults in the room?
The thing is, Daniel, is Veronica and I are both military and have had clearances and stuff and lots of training and handling classified material and all that kind of stuff. And it's, back to your thing about they keep twisting stuff and coming up with unique applications. But, the president, this whole classified document thing, I'm stunned that, back to where are the adults at, the president has the ultimate classification, declassification authority. If he says
not Biden, who had all of those by his, and all of his locations.
Stuff, who he stole the documents, by the way, because that's the only way he had them in his possession. But right. Trump was legitimately, if he says this document is declassified, nobody can override him. There's no law. That's his right as the executive authority. That's part of his core executive authority. As soon as he says it's declassified, it's declassified. He doesn't have to write a memo. He doesn't have to go get some bureaucrat's approval. It's just his word is all it takes. And to have these people come in and say, "Oh, we're going to prosecute you under the Espionage Act." I'm like, are you freaking crazy?
Yeah. Well, one thing I always try to mention, I've actually written on the documents case as well. I consider it to be a Presidential Record Act case. We can talk about that. But one thing that's very critical, and it gets overshadowed a lot, both by the way that the special counsel frames the issues and the way the media has framed the issues. I always try to remind people, President Trump, in the Florida federal documents case, in that indictment, has not been charged with any classified document violations. So it's very, very critical to remember that, because there's a series of statutes about mishandling classified documents, and President Trump hasn't been charged under any of those statutes.
I thought they charged him with espionage. Was that, maybe I misunderstood that?
No, that's the Espionage Act. He has been charged under the Espionage Act, but
oh my gosh,
he's been charged with unauthorized retention of national defense information under the Espionage Act. And national defense information under the Espionage Act does not have to be classified. And the reason this distinction comes up, and the reason that, in my opinion, the special counsel and the media conflate all of that, is because it is incredibly difficult for, particularly in these circumstances, for the government to prove. We're talking about 133 documents by last count that President Trump had that had classified markings. If you go read the indictment says this document had classified markings and this document had classified markings. That doesn't mean the document was classified at the time that President Trump had it. And the reason for that is, for instance, a good illustration. Probably everyone's seen the FISA warrant that was issued against Carter Page, if you remember that, during all the Russia collusion hoax. So the court is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, and the act is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That warrant has stamped all over it, top secret, for your eyes only, all that stuff, tap, tap, tap. If you pull it up, it's all over it. But the document's not classified anymore. You see, it's not illegal for me to have it on my computer. It's not illegal for you to have it either. So they didn't charge Trump with classified document violations. They charged him with possessing national defense information without authorization. And the real problem they have with that is, number one, no president in the history of this country has been charged under that provision of law, 18 U.S.C. 793. That's number one. Number two, President Trump was authorized. Everybody agrees, even the special counsel agreed, that President Trump was authorized at least up until some certain date to possess the documents. So that's the other issue with it. Now, I really believe it's a Presidential Records Act case. That gets kind of down into the weeds. I'll be glad to talk about it. But it is, once again, as we keep talking about, a novel use, a new use, a issue of first impression being targeted at President Trump that has never been used to target anyone in the past.
Well, I feel, Daniel, they're just throwing mud at the wall, seeing what sticks, because they want the headline. It's all about the headline, because the silly people that don't read news every day think that this is all real. But I wanted to ask you, because you've written 3 books, and I know you're writing the 4th one really right now too, probably. What was the most shocking discovery when you really dig deep into all of these? I mean, you've written in your books about the Hunter laptop, the COVID injection with bleach, you just all of it. You've gone to all, you've seen it all up close, and you've been digging deep. Was there anything that was really shocking that the public doesn't know? Because John and I, we read everything, and all along this has just been such fake news about Trump everywhere. So we have clarity.
Yeah, I would say the most shocking thing in the course of researching the books and writing the books, the most shocking, and it's not one individual piece of information. It's the orchestrated cacophony of propaganda and misinformation directed at President Trump over the Russia collusion hoax. Now, anyone who wanted to take the time to do a deep dive into it could access all of this information. So I'm not, this isn't a revelation, but what is really shocking about it is what we saw with Russia collusion was really a Democrat Party Hillary Clinton campaign contrivance that was then, we could talk about that because it's really fascinating. But basically, they conjured up this narrative and then hired some contractors to try to develop it and further, and then peddle it to federal law enforcement through a series of, people who are all interconnected in the United States Department of Justice and the FBI and the intelligence agencies and with the Democrats. And so, to me, the Russia collusion, really what Russia collusion was the precursor to the lawfare that the president's facing now. They just didn't do anything other than appointing a special counsel that got them nowhere, but it was literally the Clinton campaign. The DNC hires Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS, and they hire Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele cooks up all this hocus pocus and starts trying to peddle it to the FBI and to the Department of Justice, and then so did Glenn Simpson. And then we got Hillary Clinton, who paid for it all, by the way, while her law firm, Perkins Coie, literally launders the money and files Federal Elections Commission documents. They got fined a couple $100,000, if I recall, 300, I forget, for their false filings, claiming that it was legal fees. It was really $1 million paid to Fusion GPS to cook up this misinformation about Donald Trump. And you got Hillary going everywhere acting like this, well, this is unbelievable. Trump needs to be investigated, and she's the one who cooked it all up.
Well, I'm disgusted that letter that came out from the 50 intelligence officials saying that it was all true. And I feel like, and John and I talk about this a lot, that everything, we're like in some sort of script and it's a long ass, story that we've been trapped in, because everything seems so fake to me, from the laptop to J6, insurrection, and it just continues. So I'm like, when is this movie over? It's a horror movie that we're trapped in. And I just can't believe all of these people are such liars and have supported this horror story.
Yeah, well, look, I agree with you completely, and I'll tell you that what's even worse is there's no accountability. And a good, for instance, you remember the Trump Tower episode. The Trump Tower episode took up about 8 or 10 pages in Mueller's report, and that's where the Russian lawyer came in and told Don Jr. and at the time Paul Manafort, and I forget who else. I want to say Jared Kushner was there, and said, "Hey, I got some dirt on Hillary Clinton." So they had this meeting. Well, that lawyer was under contract with Fusion GPS, and she met with Glenn Simpson the day before the Trump Tower meeting. And then she met with Glenn Simpson after the Trump Tower meeting, except that second meeting was in Washington, D.C. So what do we know? That was all contrived. It was a setup.
Yeah, setup.
And of course, guess what? It's not illegal that you have a First Amendment right. A candidate has a First Amendment constitutional right to obtain information of whatever kind he or she wants about his or her opponent. There was nothing illegal about it. That's why no one was charged with anything, and not to mention the fact they didn't pay anybody. But even if they had, Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid Fusion GPS $1 million, who paid Christopher Steele to concoct the misinformation. So obviously that can't be illegal either. But people don't realize that so much of what the media breathlessly reported endlessly over and over and over during Trump's administration about Russia collusion was literally balderdash that the Clinton campaign and the DNC had bought and paid for and then peddled. And the federal government took it. And just look at how they got it to the DOJ. You got Bruce Orr, who was the Deputy Attorney General in the United States Department of Justice. His wife worked, Nellie Orr, worked for Fusion GPS. And then they bring the stuff to him. And it's
so are you not disgusted? I mean,
hey, we're still waiting for Adam Schiff's evidence. He's got the goods.
Yeah.
Well, so I wanted to ask you too, because DOJ and FBI, they're definitely compromised. And
No doubt.
you've been researching this, and John and I, we talked to all of these conservative guests, and so glad you're with us today. But like the November election, to me, it's like a life or death thing. If we don't win this in November, our country is, I think, gone forever. And then if we win it, and we better win it, we've got a lot to clean up, because we've got all of these Obama people and Biden people that are now in the FBI and DOJ. And how do we clean it up? And it's the election of our lifetime in November. I fully feel. So what are your thoughts on that, Daniel?
Well, I definitely believe that the election in November is the most consequential, important presidential election of my lifetime. And I was born in 1971. So in fact, I'll be 53 years old tomorrow. Okay. So
happy birthday.
Thank you. Look, we definitely have to win that election. Now, I will say this. I am not I try not to be doom and gloom. This country and the people of this country are far more resilient than even I ever anticipated. I didn't think we'd survive 8 years of Barack Obama, and we came out of that. So I don't want to say that we can't survive 4 more years of Joe Biden, but I will tell you that if we don't turn things around soon, particularly with respect to the foreign invasion we have going on in this country, and I can tell you, we're about 14 hours from the border, the Texas-Mexico border, and we're seeing significant issues with the illegals where I live. Everything from showing up in school, showing up, criminal activity, to people just walking around on the street, with nowhere to live, and that's disaster waiting to happen. And if we don't get a handle on that, there's going to be real problems, and it's going to be very challenging to try to straighten them out. I don't want to say it will be impossible, but absolutely, without a doubt, November is a watershed moment. It's a crucial moment in the history of American politics, and we need President Trump to win so that he can try to right the ship. Now, he's got a lot. I think he'll be better prepared this time than he was last time. Mm-hmm. But he's still going to he'll still have to fight all these entrenched institutional bureaucratic interests that are going to battle him at every turn. And so it's going to be more of what we saw in his first term, with misinformation, government insiders undermining his administration and all of that. But I'm hopeful that he'll be more effective. But we have one thing that's important. We have to remember, President Trump wins in the fall. In 2 years, he'll be a lame duck. Okay, so he really has 24 months to implement his policies. Now, obviously, he can use the whole term to try to correct the deep state issues, but he's got 24 months for policy, because after that, everyone starts moving on to who the next president's going to be. So we're talking about a very, very narrow window to try to correct an enormous amount of problems.
So, Daniel, have you had any blowback writing this? I mean, because it's hard to be a Trumper out there sometimes, because everybody always hates us. And so I'm just wondering, how's that been? I mean, you've written 3 books that, expose these lies.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, not too much with respect to blowback. And one of the good things is, the part of the country I live in, North Louisiana, is very conservative. And President Trump won North Louisiana by, I'd have to go back and look, to be honest with you, I want to say well over 20 points in
Nice.
2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 23 points is my recollection. He is a powerful force here. And so me personally, I mean, I've had a few people who mostly ill-informed, uninformed. And that's one of the beautiful things about my books, because I carry them around with me everywhere I go. And if somebody says something about, President Trump told people to drink bleach. No, he didn't. I pull it out and show them the receipt. No, that's not what happened here. And the thing is, people have a very strong reaction to having been lied to. So I've seen that on juries. If a party comes in, whether it's a litigant or a witness or even the lawyers, and they lie to the jury, if you prove to the jury this was a lie, this was misinformation, jurors will just drop the hammer on those people. And the average person does the same thing. So when you show somebody, hey, that's not true. That's not what President Trump said. That's not true. That's not what President Trump said. You'd be amazed how many of them convert. Now, they don't always convert to Trump voters.
Right.
But they'll convert to, hey, why are those people lying to me? And I always tell them they're lying to you because President Trump, like him or hate him, he wants to change how things are being done and to do things moving forward that are only in the best interest of this country. And that is revolutionary. And once you embrace that and believe that, then you understand why he's attacked so viciously and so relentless.
Well, it's just so sad. I don't understand why the Dems want to kill babies and they don't want Americans to be first. You know, it's just, and we're the invasion at the border is so out of control. So, so I know we're going to wrap up here, Daniel. So I hope you have your resume in for the Trump administration because I need you at the DOJ. And I know that he's accepting resumes, and I highly recommend you, just so you know.
Well, I appreciate that. I will tell you, I don't see that in my future. Obviously, if the president of the United States, Donald Trump, wins the election and he calls on me to serve, and so I mean that's not going to happen. But if he did, obviously, I would do everything I could. But I can tell you, the last place I want to be is the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington.
Well, we need you there. We need you. So is there any final thoughts? I know your books are on Amazon. Fake News Exposed About
Sure.
Trump, Daniel R. Street. You're on Substack. I liked your Twitter stuff, so I'm definitely an X person now. I'm going to be following you all the time. And I'm going to be calling you to come back because this has been a riveting discussion. What are we missing, Daniel?
Well, I tell everyone the best thing to do if you want to follow what I'm doing is to go to my website, and that's just danielrstreet.com. There's links to my social media. There's links to my Substack, and my Substack's free. It doesn't cost a dime. And you can, and I can, the good thing about Substack is I can address things that are happening now. Whereas when you write books, by the time a book comes out, it's all dated, So the Substack's more immediate. There's links to my books, and your audience right now can go to my website at danielrstreet.com and get my most recent book. It's got fake news. It's got COVID misinformation. It's got misinformation about, if you remember, the Don't Say Gay law in Florida,
right.
The Martha's Vineyard flights, the stuff about Governor DeSantis, all of that. They can get the digital version or the electronic version or the audio version for free.
Fabulous.
Can't do better than that.
Yep.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Daniel, and I'll be calling again because you are definitely a warrior in the trenches, and we hope to be at the finish line with you November 5th. Glorious.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me on. And I tell everybody the reason that we have the opportunity for the people of this country to get the truth is there's so many people like you who are willing to share the truth with people. So thank you for all you're doing.
Well, thanks. And God bless you. And we'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome back to Veronica Live. And I'm here with Statesman John. And this is our roundup, political roundup. Well, number one, I wanted to say yesterday, New York City, where my children live, had a 4.8 earthquake. And then they had an aftershock that I think was about 4.4. In the evening. And so, of course, I was terrified because, I worry about terrorists in New York City, John, but not earthquakes.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. I never associated New York with earthquakes. I mean, I've been in California, up in the skiing up in Lake Tahoe when they had an earth tremor, I guess. I don't know if it was an earthquake or earth tremor, but it's like, what the hell's that? And it's like, oh, that's just an earthquake, So
well,
it was like nothing to them people. But
it was funny because my son it didn't even faze him because in Japan we definitely had them, and So he wasn't even fazed, but I was fazed. So I was just like,
so did they even notice? Did any kids notice it?
No, they did. Like the floor was shaking and the computers and my son was actually at his apartment and he works from home, and so the whole building was shaking. So it was substantial. But I will say, I complain a lot about New York, but I follow the mayor now on X, and after yesterday, I follow like some emergency New York kind of outlets that get information out. I was very impressed with how they were on top of it and getting the information out ASAP. And then Twitter is just amazing, because once it happened, it went viral on Twitter with everyone. And New York was definitely racing to make sure that all the bridges and things were good to go. And New York Post put out an article. I think it has to be 5.6. It was when an earthquake needs to start like impacting buildings structurally. So
Okay,
I learned a lot
better than my concern
yesterday.
with all high-rise buildings,
Yeah, I learned a lot. And, and it was funny because I actually Googled when I was in high school. I lived up in northern Maine. There used to be a base there called Loring Air Force Base. And when I was in 9th grade, we had a terrible earthquake. And in Maine, of all places. And I'm traumatized because when I was young, I lived on Guam, like K through 3rd grade. And I was trapped in a house once because in the old days, they trained you to run out of the house. And then, of course, when I lived in Vegas, they had an earthquake. So wherever I move, there's earthquakes, because I'm special. But it was kind of interesting because that was like a 5.8 back, in 82 was the one in Maine. Yeah. And now New York's having earthquakes, because we had the big one in Taiwan too this week that brought down a bunch of buildings. And so praying for all of those people. But I was very impressed with New York and getting the information out. So that at least that was a positive.
Well, glad everybody's safe on that one. So.
Right. But back to Blinken declaring that Ukraine is going to join NATO, where, President Putin said that, if you invite them to NATO, well, that's going to be World War III. And so, of course, all the media outlets went bananas with it. Are we in World War III? And the only reason I can think that Biden's doing this is because he's definitely losing in the polls. If the numbers are accurate, and what better than to have a war? And then people are like, oh, well, we can't change, the guard now because we're in war.
Well, the whole thing. First off, the Biden administration was criticizing the Ukrainians this past week. They actually attacked inland into Russia. I think it was about 750 miles inland. Oil refineries and military bases with Ukrainian-built drones, Ukrainian designed and built drones. So they did some substantial damage. They estimate that they took out at least 10 to 15% of the Russians' oil refining capacity with these attacks. So what does the Biden regime do? Instead of saying they said, well, this is bad news because now you're attacking Russia and you're going to escalate it. What the hell do you think having Ukraine join NATO is? Is that not a provocation of the Russians? And because Putin's already said, not happening. Okay, so it's like what is it? You're complaining when they do something in their own interest to protect themselves, that it's going to escalate stuff, and then you turn around and blabber your mouth and escalate stuff anyway. So
well, they're just who's in control, and then why the October event in Israel was their 9/11. When we had our 9/11, nobody was telling us what we could or couldn't do. And what business do we have to tell them that? Now, granted, 7 aid workers were killed this week. I don't want anybody killed. They were doing something noble, trying to get people food. But I do think these Hamas are not letting those people leave because they want, civilian collateral for more news stories,
right.
John.
The Hamas doesn't care. The Palestinians are cannon fodder. That's all they are. They don't care. And the more they get killed, the happier they are. First off, the 30,000 number that keeps getting bandied about is a Hamas-provided number, okay? The enemy is providing this number, yet our press runs like it's the gospel truth, and nobody ever questions it. And to me, that's irresponsible. But, we just, talking to Daniel, the press is not responsible, are they, when it comes to reporting stuff? But here we have Chuck Schumer telling the Israelis, you need to change your government. You need to have an election and elect a new president. And that's like, wait a minute. Aren't we complaining about Russian interference in our elections?
Well, and then we're bossing, because Netanyahu and Biden had a call. So I've got this. I sent it to you, the release of the phone call, because Biden and all of the Dems are getting so beat up. If you go on the White House Instagram, it's like, what about the people in Gaza? So whoever's writing these statements, they're saying that, Biden emphasized the strikes on the humanitarian workers and the overall situation is unacceptable, and they're telling them to stop. But what happened the day that Israel was invaded? These were not soldiers. These were innocent people. They killed babies. I mean...
They cut off people's heads. They put babies in ovens.
They raped and raped, and they're still raping people. They still have hostages, and we're telling them what to do.
They make movies of it, and they're Allah Akbaring the whole time there, and it's just, these people are vermin that need to be exterminated. Okay, you may think that's a little bit harsh, but believe me, that's what this takes.
Well, because they'd want to kill us. I'm telling you. They'd want to kill us if they were over here. Their
objective is to kill every Jew. That's their objective, okay? You're not going to change their mind about it. So the only alternative that the Israelis have is to exterminate those people. Okay?
I mean, it's just
there's
awful.
No redeeming them. They're
Because you
irredeemable.
See these children in Gaza, and who would put your own children in harm's way and try to make it so they
Hamas
don't have
would do
food?
That.
Obviously it's not about their people.
Why do you think they build their headquarters under hospitals?
Yeah.
Because we don't bomb hospitals, right? So, if you bomb hospitals, it makes a great story, about how horrible the Israelis are. And the Israelis have uncovered all this stuff. But get back to Ukraine, after the break here, they're going to come back and they're going to try and pass the Ukraine aid package, and Speaker Johnson's getting his arm twisted to do something. And what the guess is that the Democrats are going to get behind whatever package that Johnson has, and they'll peel off a couple of Republicans enough to get it passed. And which back to that whole $60 billion. I just have so many problems with it because we're not helping them win. Okay, the Biden administration has zero interest in helping the Ukrainians win the war. They don't want Russia defeated. They want the Ukrainians to stalemate until they negotiate. How many hundreds? You talk about 30,000 in Gaza being killed. How many hundreds of thousands have been killed in Ukraine and Russia? Far, far more people have been killed in that war than what's going on in the Middle East. Yet nobody says anything about it from a humanitarian crisis standpoint. Why? Are Ukrainian lives less valuable than Palestinian lives? Where's the criticism? Where's the effort to, kill people and break things? Okay, that's war until the enemy has had enough.
War is messy.
That's how you
war
stop
is
it.
awful. Plus, these people that they're warring with don't play fairly, anyways. Who rapes women and beheads babies?
Right.
And then we're the problem because we, we're mean to Hamas, okay? Well, they killed people. They did atrocious stuff. They still have prisoners. There was one lady that was in the news in the last couple of weeks, talking about her rape, rapes. So these people are sick and disgusting. But you said in the afterburner stack, we've got the only U.S. lawmaker born in Ukraine is now skeptical of more aid. So Representative Victoria Spart speaks of atrocities witnessed by friends and family in Ukraine, but says she won't vote for the proposed $60 billion aid package for Ukraine. So I don't know. I wanted you to comment on that because that's like, whoa. Her family and friends are over there and she's done writing the checks. And then I take it all back to John, to the border that's getting overrun because apparently there's been an uptick in Arizona, Pennsylvania, even in Texas of all of these people registering to vote that are not Americans. And then a lot of these states, they're just going to be like, you want to vote? Come on. Nobody looks at your license and verifies you're an American. So I'm so concerned about November, honestly.
Well, it's back to, the back to the oil thing. Okay. This is the funny part. Okay. Because the other story that goes with this is the Biden administration is concerned that because the Ukrainians took out a bunch of Russian oil refining capacity, that the price of oil, world prices for oil, are going to go up. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought Russian oil was embargoed by the world. Wasn't that? Oh yeah, they made a whole lot of noise about that, and yet they're concerned that taking out Russian oil refining capacity is going to raise the price of oil in the world, which is bad news for them from a political standpoint, because now we're going back to $100 or $100+ a barrel oil, and you're going to see your gas price go up to $3 to $4 a gallon in the next 4 or 5 months because the Ukrainians took out a bunch of Russian oil capacity, which is embargoed supposedly, but it's not because they don't really want to do that. And they're playing these games, Veronica, and we, the American people, are paying the price in more ways than one. We're taking money we don't have. We're printing more money to buy defense goods to send over there for a war we don't want them to win.
Well, and then people get mad, and and we're not letting them win.
Representative this Ukrainian-born woman says, enough's enough. Either get a strategy where we're going to win, as in defeat the Russians and push them back and get them out of Ukraine, or just quit. Just negotiate something and give the Russians half of Ukraine and walk away. And maybe that's what Trump's going to do. I don't know. Trump's going to end it though. So it's either get in there to win or get the hell out. And that's kind of what that's my position. If we're all in, send them the attack.
But we haven't been all in. We've been like piecemealing. And then what? It was funny because I saw Blinken talking, and then I heard the sound bites, and he's definitely aged. Oh my gosh, this position has aged the man. But
well, he's doing the job that Biden's not doing. Biden's
I feel
that
that way. But why? Why all of a sudden are we crossing this line that Putin said not to cross, and then I'm very vocal now on X, and why are we doing this? If Trump was in the White House, I wouldn't be scared because I don't think anybody would mess with us. But when Sleepy Joe, who had an event this week, it was supposed to be at 11. They pushed it back to 12 because apparently he sleeps till 10. He showed up late, had his CPAP marks on his face, which I know plenty of people that wear CPAP, so I'm not anti-CPAPs because we want you to be alive. And then he was babbling, they played the soundbite of him at this event. He was all over the place. So we know
Joe Biden's not running the country. Okay,
no, he's not running the country.
Dan Bongino show for the past couple of weeks has been playing the president's daily schedule. You know what his daily schedule is?
Like nothing. He's on vacation right now. By the way,
he gets the presidential daily briefing, which is not done in person. They give him an iPad with the daily briefing on it. Apparently, that's his only event for the entire day. And Bongino's like, look, I worked in the Bush and the Obama White House, on the president's protective detail. As a Secret Service, your schedule is their schedule, and believe me, Biden and Bush both packed in full days with lots of stuff. And all you get out of this one is presidential daily briefing, and that's it, which means
there is an Easter egg hunt or transgender day tied into it, Well, I wanted to ask your thoughts, too, because, you are just a few years older than me and wiser. But the Biden administration canceled the buyback of 3 million barrels to replenish the oil stockpile. So I guess we use this oil to bring down gas prices, and now we're not replenishing the 50 million barrels. Are you concerned? This sounds very scary to me.
It's worse than that, Veronica. They've drawn so much out of it that the structure, these underground caverns that they had the oil stored in, are collapsing because they're empty. Mm-hmm. They've taken the oil out that was stored in there.
So maybe it's all on purpose,
now they're falling
like everything
apart.
Else.
Right. So even if they wanted to refill them with $100 plus, see, here's the part, okay? They took the oil out and sold it at, I think it was around $60 a barrel. Now they have to refill it at $100 a barrel, and they can't afford to. So what's wrong?
I wanted your thoughts on this because I know you're worldlier on this
we have no
oil.
strategic oil reserve anymore. It's gone. And by the way, the Biden people want it that way.
Yeah,
They don't want an oil reserve because they hate oil.
As we know, because Buttigieg wants us all driving EVs, that there's going to be nowhere to plug in.
Right.
To
30 years, you don't need an oil reserve in by 2030 because we're all electric. We're all no emissions, and it's these people are insane. I mean, they're not only insane, they're stupid, and they're putting their stupid insane on the rest of the American people, and it's just I can't imagine this is America. I'm not losing hope here, okay? We can fix this stuff if we get the right people in there that apply common sense and undo this crap.
Well, I pray we take November. I pray. But it's going to be such a long time to undo this. And that's why the VP pick has got to be right, because we're going to need Republicans in the office for years to come.
Well, that was one of the stories there is Don Jr. came out and said he wants a fighter.
I know. I'm with you on that. I agree with him.
He doesn't want somebody that's just, he doesn't want Mike Pence there, who was put in there because to balance the ticket, He wants somebody that's going to get in and kick ass. And this, now back to age thing here, okay, going way back. Nixon had Spiro Agnew, who was his attack dog, okay? That's why he brought him along, as an attack dog. And that's what he did. That was his job as VP, was to attack the press on Nixon's behalf. And he did a damn good job of it. But, so we need somebody that's a fighter, and we need to remember whoever the vice presidential pick will most likely be the candidate for president in 4 years.
Well,
so I want
we got
somebody
to have a strong fighter and nobody that's going to quit, because this week I heard a lot of Ben Carson, which the man's brilliant, but he doesn't come off like I want more of a war dog. And that Elise Stefanik, who took out the Harvard Dr. Gay, that woman was an idiot plagiarizer. Like, that woman, she showcased she was a fighter. Tim Scott, I've been hearing him on tons of interviews. I mean, he's great, but he's not hardcore enough. I think Marco Rubio's still in there.
You need a Ramaswamy type personality.
Well, that knows how to debate. Yeah, you've got to have that kind of strong.
That's the kind of personality.
And that's that Elise Stefanik.
That can stand up and give better than they're getting,
Kristi Noem is still being thrown out there, and I've seen that woman in action. I will say she's great. I don't know about the alleged affair with Corey.
That's all.
It's probably
that's
fake
all
news.
Political fake news.
Yeah.
They're just trying to to me, that's back to the Roy Moore. Here comes the. Pick whatever male candidate you want. They're gonna haul out somebody to say, "Oh, I slept with him." They did it to Kavanaugh.
Well, Senator Vance is great too.
Oh, I like him. Yep.
And then, so we've got to have a fighter in there. We have to have somebody that's young, vibrant, going to be around. Ramaswamy I love, but he's kind of late at entering in the political world to begin with, that I want him to serve in a cabinet position to grow and really show me that you are the Republican you say you are. So,
well, there's that, and I don't know that he has the world political experience. I may get that as vice president,
Right.
But
Right.
that's that and that's why I didn't like him as a presidential candidate. Is I don't think he was he was good on economics, okay, but he was not
Well,
good
he's
on world
great
policy.
at debating, and
Right.
he does show that he's strong, and I want that.
He does his homework. He comes back with the facts, and he'll go toe to toe with these people, and he's not offensive in doing it. He does it in a way that's likable.
Now,
and that's what I liked about him.
Governor Huckabee Sanders has been coming out doing a lot of interviews, and this week
she would be smoking. She would be smoking. I like her.
She's the
she doesn't
future.
Want to do it, but,
she's 42, and then she ended this interview I saw this week. She's like, well, I've got 7 years to go in Arkansas. And I'm like, Arkansas is a little drop in the hat here. We need you on the world stage. And she was excellent when she was
But she's
comm
getting
director.
She's getting executive experience. She's building.
I mean, she's going to be somebody someday, and
right.
I hope it's sooner.
Right. And part of what you need to look at from and this was one of Trump's weaknesses when he was elected in 2016. He was the outsider, yes. He did not have a political team in place. He had to rely on the Washington swamp Republicans for their advice on who to put in different places. And he made a lot of horrible choices. He should have fired Comey. He should have walked in the door and fired Comey.
Yeah. Oh, that man just stabbed him in the back so many times.
Well, when he found out that they were spying, and this was during the transition period, and I'm trying to remember who it was. It was a Navy admiral that was in charge of the DIA. I forget which agency he was. He was head of one of the intel agencies. He went to Trump and told him that Trump Tower is bugged, that the intel agencies are listening to your conversations that you're having in Trump Tower, because all of a sudden Trump decamped from Trump Tower to Bedminster, New Jersey, where they did not have it wired. He should have, at that point, if I would have been Trump at that point, I would have said, are you effing joking me that the intel agencies have bugged my apartment, my offices in Trump Tower, and are listening to the next president of the United States conversations? That should have set off so many alarm bells it wouldn't have been funny.
But nothing sets off alarm bells anymore. These people are doing whatever they want, from stalking reporters, all of that.
I would have went in there and said, Comey, you're gone. I would have fired every one of those people. Every one of them would have been gone. And yet, and then you see the damage that Comey did, by leaving him in there.
Right.
So this time around, it's not going to be. That's not the Trump that's going in there. Okay, that's not the naive Trump that doesn't have a team. This Trump's got a team. This Trump knows the people that want to stab him in the back, and I'm hoping he'll put enough people in there.
Look at this week. Laura Trump, like RNC's killing it. I think it was 90-something million that came in because nobody wants to donate with silly Rona, who needed to go a long time ago. So, let me look up the exact fee that she brought in. She has his back. She's family, but it shouldn't just be family that has your back.
Right, but are we going to see like Whitaker go in for Attorney General? He's got the experience. He's been there. He was acting Attorney General for a short period of time, after the election, and it's like, he knows what's going on. He knows where the garbage is at that needs to be taken out.
Well,
and that's what I'm hoping is we'll see Trump people, and Trump not unreasonably, in my opinion, demands loyalty. Okay. The Democrats have the discipline. They have the loyalty and they have the discipline, and nobody says anything about it. But when the Republicans do it, it's like, oh, you're just a corrupt, whatever. It's like, if you can't trust the people you put in these positions to run the agencies and carry out your policies, then you've got the wrong person in that position. There's nothing wrong with loyalty. Absolutely. We want people to be loyal to the United States, right?
Yeah. No,
loyalty
that's a virtue.
Is a virtue.
where, like in the military, semper fidelis, always faithful, truthful.
Right, exactly.
And, the funny thing is, there's been so much talk about Congressman Gallagher stepping away, and then he now has landed a job with Palantir, which is this really incredible company that's getting all kinds of military contracts. But people are so upset. And then, I was listening to the Clay and Buck show this week, and I guess something's up with that's making him step away. So there is a backstory that he doesn't want to release. So I don't know if it's a health issue, something. And so they're like, that's why he's stepping away. But it's been so painful because his stepping away now, not
Veronica, I disagree 100% because of the timing of what he did.
Well, I know it's horrific.
The fact that he made his resignation effective the day after they can't have a special election.
It hurts so bad.
Tells me everything I need to know about what's going on.
Well, who's true? Who's true? Washington's just a bunch of liars everywhere.
Exactly. They're all liars, and it's number one, rule one, follow the money. Number two,
we're getting so many tattoos. Yeah, follow the money. Woke. Now we got the lawfare.
Follow the money. Right. Follow the money. Don't get dead. Okay. Another good rule. But look at the outcomes. Look at what the people do. Look at their actions. Okay.
Yeah.
And the actions. And I learned this when I was running for, when I ran for county commission the first time. When you're dealing with other people, and if you want to know who they are, it's not just what they say. Watch the nonverbal actions that they do. And I watched that during a debate between two county commission candidates. We had three of us up on three seats. It was district I think 1, 3, and 5. Anyway, those seats were all open. They were all competitive, and we were all up there. All 6 of us that were running in the Republican primary were up there. For a televised debate event. And I was watching the 2 people for District 5, I think it was, next to me, and they had to share a microphone, okay? And every time the one candidate that was the rich guy, who thought he had it in a bag, and I watched him, and his opponent, when they would switch questions, every time it was a he and a she, by the way. So he would answer, and he was very dismissive and derisive of his opponent. And so when it was her time to answer, he would not pass the microphone to her. She had to reach over and take it and move it over to her in order to answer so that you could hear her response. And I mean, just little things like that, Veronica, if you watch for that kind of stuff, it tells you who you're really dealing with. It's the little things.
Well, I'm done with Dems. I'm just over it lately because it's a culture of death. And when that's your number one platform, something's up. I'm done. And then all of this, we're growing these children that are young adults now that should be taking care of themselves and getting real jobs, but yet we're going to pay for your loans for your basket weaving degree. And I'm just done because you and we continually work hard. You're 69. I'm a young 55. But we give all every day in everything we do. And I don't want other people just getting away with it. And I just feel the Dems open that door. All of these illegals now, which they're going to be voting in these states. And if people don't wake up and Christians, and I've said this many times on this show, Pastor Rafael Cruz said, if every Christian went to vote, we wouldn't have to worry. So
right.
Christians need to do their duty and vote because it's about our country and the Constitution and America and saving babies and having a strong military and being on the world stage where we're respected. And we're not there. We're not there now.
Well, the problem is we're just giving away everything. We've got all these illegals coming into this country, and we pander to them. We give them everything. They're coming in. They give them a cell phone. They're giving them debit cards with $1,200 that they can spend however they want to spend.
No, I think an average family can bring in almost 8 to 10K a month.
Right.
And that's a high-paying job in America.
Right, feeding them. And it's like American citizens don't get treated like that, yet we treat the illegals like that, that are breaking the law to come into this country. And so I have this fundamental problem with that, and even, as we commenting, it passed Easter last week, and I went to the Easter vigil, and I was appalled because they did half the mass in Spanish.
Well, you told me that, and I went
to
the 10 o'clock. I am fluent in Spanish, and it was not touted any of these masses that they were going to be bilingual, because they have a bilingual 12:30 mass, and our first reading was in Spanish, but it wasn't. We've got the missalette booklets that have the reading, so I read it in English, and then some of the prayers were in Spanish, which there was no translation for, and I kind of. My husband and I commented about it too, because there's times when you go to a bilingual, or like in Paris, a trilingual, whatever. I've been to the Notre Dame, and it's touted as that.
Right.
This was not
touted
what
as
to expect
when you walk in the door.
And I've gone to Spanish masses. I've gone to German. I've been to masses around the world, but it was our biggest season of Christian season, and it wasn't in English. And I kind of felt for people that didn't know Spanish, because when a lot of these words, like the biblical words, sometimes it's like I told you when we were chatting about it, that it's like Shakespeare. It's not a normal word that even if you had studied Spanish, it's in per se your vocabulary. So that's the thing, is that I don't know what's going on, because it shouldn't have been a bilingual mass, because our church does do like a trilingual, Filipino, Spanish, and English, but all the English is always available to you. So I know I was kind of shocked too, because my husband commented on it, because he understands a lot of Spanish, but he's not bilingual by any means. And Easter was important.
I don't go to church to listen to Spanish language prayers,
because you didn't choose that.
I don't understand them. So what's the point of going to church?
And
if they're going to speak to me in a language I don't understand, what's the point?
I had gone Friday to the veneration, so it was 2 hours, and there was lots of Hispanics at the mass, and they all. So I don't know if the church issues this, but they had like a little lanyard, and there was a machine, and they had earpieces, so I think it's some sort of translator. So I was like, okay, well, it is in English, so they're getting some translation, but it is an American church that does mass in English.
Exactly. We live in America, we speak English, and if the foreigners can't speak English, going back to another immigration problem, because for real immigrants to this country that come here legally, become citizens, you have to speak English in order to get your citizenship. Okay. So I give no quarter to these people that come into this country and want to live in a Spanish community where all they speak is Spanish. And I'm done with it. It's like, this is America.
I don't mind if it's teased as the trilingual mass, which our church does, because we have a big Filipino contingent and there's big Hispanic contingent, but this was not touted like this. And I've talked to a couple other people that attended, and they were kind of shocked too, because
if they want to provide the translators to the foreigners that don't speak English, I'm fine with that. Great. Use the technology. We've got technology. Let's use it. But don't force me. Don't tell me I have to use technology because you don't want to talk to me in my native language in the native country that I live in. That's the problem. That's the fundamental problem. And we get everybody, and I don't know who's behind it, whether it's the bishop level, if it's just something at the local diocese level. I don't know where this push is coming from. But it sure the hell needs to stop, and stop quick. But speaking of church, by the way, I don't know if you saw the story. I saw Father Pete is now Brigadier General Pete, Father Pete.
Yes, that has happened. I need to get him on the show because he's our former.
Why am I not surprised?
Right. He's a former priest here where we live, and he's always been in the reserves. And so it's so amazing that he's now a 1-star general. I love it. And he's actually on the cover of the campus. The Catholic Compass magazine?
Yeah.
And I already knew that because it went crazy on Facebook. All my Catholic friends were posting. But yeah, it's great when it's the right guy that, lands. And so I went out yesterday with, met my husband and the baby F-22 pilot class who I hadn't met, and they're graduating from the rigors of flying the simulator, and they're going to get the keys in about a week or so.
All right, actually get to fly
their
by
first flight in $100 million F-22. And so the reason I bring it up, because I don't talk politics with these men and women, and this class that I met was all men this time, but they're just it warms my heart. It gives me hope because they're patriotic, they're excited, they're ready to serve their country. They're about to go experience this. I mean, they've all flown because they've been to, the first year pilot training that got them to, their cream of the crop to be F-22 pilots. So this is the fancy version to get the car keys to fly the Ferrari of an F-22, but just the excitement, the passion, I always want to meet each class because it warms my heart, and it gives me hope that, our nation, our days ahead are going to be good because we have these youthful men and women that want to serve and have a love of country, and they want to be fighter pilots.
well, and it's probably one of the last bastions of merit-based, selection and.
Well, you have to be the best. You have to be the best.
Exactly. They don't. It's not DEI is not flying that airplane. You need when you hand the keys, like you said.
I don't talk politics with them.
26, 27-year-olds. You think?
Well, a couple were like 24, 25, 26, around that ballpark.
Okay, so
a lot.
You're handing the keys to a national asset because there's not a whole lot of F-22s, and you don't want them crashing them.
But it warmed my heart. Like I was with all of them for a couple hours. We're having a great time, and I chatted with all of them because I want to feel it, And when you get to meet these studettes, you feel it, the love of country, and I just they light up. I'm like, are you excited to go fly an F-22? And their face just like explodes. I can't wait.
That way too. Like, you bet your butt
literally, you see the biggest smiles ever. I mean, there's no gloom. Yep. You know what I'm saying? So it always like charges my batteries to be around these incredible people that have chosen to serve, like you and I did. We make these. One of the things that was funny talking with them, what's always a little daunting is that they sign they have 10 years they have to be in. So that's a big commitment, but like I remember when I signed my first contract was just for 4 with the military, and I was like, 4 years, you're like panicked, oh my gosh. And blink 20.
Oh, it goes,
it goes fast. And then
but you look at the investment that's being made, in training them and stuff, and it's
and they don't know where they're going to land, because they go from here now up to Langley, and then after the Langley training, they'll get Langley, Alaska, or Hawaii.
Yeah, I don't know. The Alaska thing would be like really.
Well, a couple of them wanted that actually. I was like, I'm out. Yeah,
okay, I spent a year in Iceland, and when I was in the Navy there, and flying the P-3s out of Iceland, and it was the winter time in Iceland. It's not fun.
No, because I'm always losing a glove. And where's
that's
my
exactly
hat?
Right. I was.
And in Alaska, you have to wear them. So.
Yeah, well, I was there in a summer deployment, and the high was like 60 degrees. Everybody thought it was like heat wave.
Well, I just want to, I tell this story because America is a great place, and there are those serving our nation that care and understand what it means. And so,
that's what Representative Rudman, was saying. It's like you need to go to these other countries, and I would tell you, I've been blessed because my dad was in the Army, so we didn't. The longest I lived anywhere was Williamsburg for probably 6 or 7 years when I was in elementary and junior and high school. But we lived in Germany for 2 years when I was growing up. Third and fourth grade was in Germany. And, it's like you get exposed to this different stuff. And then, when I joined the Navy, and since I've been traveling all over the world, and it's like you're always glad to come back to America after you've been to the other places.
It's a great place to live. And so I did want to transition. We'll end it with our political cartoons of the week because you always pick them. And is it Monday's the big eclipse? So don't look up at the sun, because the show will be out by then. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta, schools are like not letting children go out to recess, and we're putting everybody's got their blinds and curtains pulled, but you sent me an eclipse is coming. And so it's big orange man. Trump is in front. And then behind him is this pale, gaunt Biden that looks like death. And so Trump is the eclipse is going to be covering him. And I was like, oh, that is brilliant. You totally nailed it, John.
I thought that was so funny.
And then the other joke I'm still scarred from because, I recently broke my band and went to Target. Oh, I forgot to talk about it. I went to Target. I broke my band because my daughter was here from New York and there was some things we needed to get from Target. So I stepped foot in Target. I have not been in Target in a year and a half or more. And they've canceled my credit card. And so I'm in Target in the ladies area. And this big, huge picture is of a woman, and then next to her, the face is a man, a black man that was wearing makeup that obviously was one of these I don't know what he was, but that was in the ladies section, this awful picture. So I'm like, ugh. And then there was a section of, it was like black empowerment gear, like Adidas kind of wear with all this black power. And I was like, what is going on? It's not even February. And why are we promoting breaking away from being an American again? And right. So I was kind of scandalized. It was all of this because I was like, white people or Asian people, we could never have Asian power, on everything.
Right. You certainly couldn't put up a white power gear,
Oh, no. But it was a whole section with that. And I was kind of like, I'm always about, everybody talks about bringing everybody together. And how do we do that? It's by surrounding yourself with the American flag and knock off these, agendas everywhere. So, and fast forward to Easter weekend, because we haven't had this, talked about it, but the Biden administration pushed out that it was Transgender Day with all of this releases. The Governor Hochul had every single building in New York lit up for Transgender Day, not for Easter. And like Peter Feynman, who's our national committee man, posted a picture of New York from like the 50s where the buildings had crosses on them in New York. And even the Niagara Falls was transgender visibility on Easter. And so your little joke here is this scary, hairy man that's got rabbit ears. And he's got boobs bolted on, and his shirt's purple. It says Transgender Day of Visibility, and he's holding a sign that should say Happy Easter, but Easter's crossed out, and it says Trans Day on it. Happy Trans Day. And then there's lovely Biden with his sippy cup, and he's got blood on his hands, and it says he says, "Oh, they them has risen." So take your pronouns and shove it. So
I thought that whole cartoon said so much. It wasn't funny.
Well, it's not even a real person, and I'm like scandalized by the guy.
Well, you remember if you remember and what's funny is they call it the Transgender Day of Visibility, and if you remember, what was it, about a year ago, whatever it was, they had some transgender event at the White House, and the transgender
yeah.
thing took off his top to show his
and was
whatever
so that's the thing is we've endured that. We've had the gay staffer that had sex in one of the like pristine briefing rooms. I think that was in the Capitol.
Oh, in the congressional hearing room had.
I mean,
we've
put up
on video.
We have put up with more crap. Where is your pride and like being a lady or a gentleman? Like this doesn't exist with this party. And so, yeah, I'm just over it. And then, you know, since I'm such an ex person and I've gone since I've got the check mark, I've always been on like 25,000 feeds. And this week I broke to over 50,000. And so I'm very excited. I'm getting close to 60. So I'm definitely out there now, but I've started following J.K. Rowling, who is a liberal. She's a full-on liberal, the writer of the wonderful, you know, fun Harry Potter series, and she's a billionaire. How you say that with a, you know, she's
got FU money.
Yes, which I'd love to have FU money, but I can't seem to win the Powerball, which is over $1 billion. So I'm going to try again today. But she has FU money, and she's come out and said that men are men and women are women, and it doesn't stop pretending. If you have male parts that you're a woman, you're not. So she's taken this radical stance. So I've started following her. And like today, she's already been tweeting up a storm. But like people put death threats on her page. And so she like screenshots it and is like, well, thanks, you know. And then Scotland, of course, you want to talk about the Scotland thing?
Scotland, they're threatening to arrest her for
and she said, bring it. She said, bring it. You know? Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, I think I heard what brought me back on that story was when I heard that, and you may or may not be aware of this, but back Robert Bork, I don't know if you know who he is.
Yes,
but,
because
you know,
he was put up to be a Supreme Court justice, and he ended up the law school at my college, George Mason University. Like he came and joined the team, and it's like one of the conservative law schools in the country. So I know who he is. Yeah,
one of the best legal minds this country's ever seen, right? And they quote borked him. Biden was behind it, by the way, and a key player in that, but they borked him. They basically destroyed his reputation to where he had to withdraw from being.
Well, so they've been playing these games forever, honestly.
Right, but he wrote a book called Defining Deviancy Down, and he was absolutely dead on right about what's going on, and predicted every bit of what you see. They're trying to normalize deviancy. That's exactly what's going on.
Well, what has happened at the White House? When have you ever had somebody like take off their top, woman or man, at the White House, or have sex except for Bill Clinton that had, you know, sex in the Oval Office. He's the only one, and he was on their team. So give me a break. Give me a break.
It was completely inappropriate.
Oh my gosh!
Completely disrespectful to what the societal norm should be. And yet it's paraded about as some great heroic act, you know. It's like that Sam, whatever the hell his name, the guy who was in charge of nuclear waste disposal.
Yes,
you know, that they appointed,
everybody's
stealing all the luggage,
and he was wearing the women's outfits at his events.
Yes, you could wear their dresses.
Could you even imagine, like, you go to work and this guy that says he's non-binary now is wearing a dress and high heels and lipstick, but is fully a guy. And that was a story that came out this week, too. The Daily Mail had Sting, who's famous from the Police and his own being a solo artist, and his wife, Trudy, that's famous for being married to Sting and a yoga person. Their daughter is like 30, and so she claims now to be non-binary. So they have all these pictures of her at some event, Hollywood event, and she's wearing a tux, no makeup, has long hair, and all the comments, like in the cut lines, oh, she looks so dapper, or, you know, and I'm like, no. So I'm just tired. It's continually pushing this agenda, and you and I are the bad guys, and don't tell me the whole world's trans, and be whatever you want. Yeah. Be whatever you want, but stop telling me that I have to, you know,
You don't have to
it's
accept
normal.
it.
It's not.
Right.
And stories are coming out. Like the Mayo has a story, and like JK posted, I heard the story, about what happens to people when they put them on these blockers and stuff. I mean, It's not a good thing. It's causing them to have more cancer. It's not normal. And then there was the other story that came out saying that a lot of these kids outgrow it, and when you talk to young people that are normal,
that was a stunning study. They're not talking about that study that was.
Oh no, they're trying to
first
suppress
serious
it.
Study that was done over, what was it, 10 or 12 years, that they followed these kids that thought they were transgender, and it turned out that they weren't when they got to be into their
Guess
20s.
what?
They got
this
normal.
never existed before, John. And before it used to be people were anorexic and bulimic. We barely hear about that now because they've literally transitioned to this now because it's a call for attention. And then all of these girls that say they're gay, because everybody pays attention to them. They never got attention before.
Right.
And so
and they go through phase. It goes through phases. It's like the high school, the goth thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh yes, that still exists. It still exists, but they're like 0.1 now percent.
Exactly, but it's a phase. It's you go to what did we call girls that like to do sports and stuff when they were back in my day? You called them tomboys.
Yeah,
but they outgrew it. Or
right.
Most of them did, or whatever. But nobody thought that. Just because they like doing some things that the boys did, that's why they call them tomboys, that they wanted to be men.
Well, my problem
that never
is...
occurred. I never heard of that.
And then, of course, Biden tried to walk it back. Oh, well, that's just when the transgender day landed. No, you usurped our Easter. You truly did.
Yep.
And when you talk to religious people, that truly, the birth of Jesus is great and important, but the resurrection to come and save us. So I've been vocal. I've been putting it all out there on X and
we should. And then Biden denying that he issued the proclamation. I mean, he literally said, "I didn't do that," and he did. But I mean,
well, his
back
people,
to his
his loser people that are running, they just fully suck. But I will say the backlash on X and all the news story, and on Facebook and on Instagram, you saw like Christians. That was like the first time I think they poked We're the Bear, the Christian bear, and Christians were actually like taken aback and so angry. And then of course I try to post something on Twitter or on Instagram that somebody's an idiot, and it gives me the reminder, you better not do that, and I'm like, that's why I love X.
Watch your microaggressions.
I know, I'm so passive aggressive,
Well, Veronica, it really shows you that the truth is they don't care about religion. They don't care about Christians. To them, Easter is the day the Easter bunny comes and leaves candy and eggs. You have the egg roll and stuff. Has absolutely nothing to do with the fact
and you saw that story for the egg roll.
Risen, they don't believe it. They don't.
Well, they had the guard of one of the National Guards. A bunch of families were coming, and they were informed, all the people coming to the White House, not to have Christian crosses or anything on the eggs. That it was going to be secular, and I was like, what? And then he pretends to be Catholic. And so there's been some pushback for some of these, higher Catholic leaders. I'm just over it. You cannot kill babies and be Catholic. That's the line. That's the line. Putin has his Ukraine can't join NATO line. And I've got my, you're killing babies. And I'm just over it now. I'm just... Well,
it's like Israel and the Palestinians. The Democrat Party sides with the Palestinians, and there's a visceral
which
hatred
is shocking,
for the Israelis
and to think
Jews.
Schumer is Jewish. So all of these,
but he's a liberal. He's a liberal first, and he's Jewish second. Okay, that's the problem. The same thing with Joe Biden. He's a liberal first and a Catholic third, fourth,
but you
fifth,
can't
whatever,
be a cafeteria Catholic. I've been following Catholic Vote on
Nancy Pelosi, same way,
Yep, Catholic Vote on Instagram and X. They're excellent because they're pushing back. They are pushing back on this. You cannot be Catholic and be pro killing babies.
Right.
So I know I harp on it every week. I talk, about this, but this is their number one agenda.
Well, we need to expose these people for what they are in reality.
And then why would you let all these illegals
behind their religion?
I listened to the Cooner Report from Boston. It's great. It comes on at like 5 a.m. And so I listen to his show a lot. I call in a lot. I send him messages. What's happening, just for example, in a blue state like Massachusetts being overrun by illegals everywhere. I'm telling you, this is why I can't leave Florida, because DeSantis signed the no squatter. You can't squat here in Florida.
Yep.
Why could you squat anywhere when it's not your property? It doesn't belong to you. That's potentially somebody's income.
The liberals invent rights that don't exist. Like you have a right to housing, and that trumps people's personal property rights.
Well, and then yet we don't take care of veterans, or our own homeless population that has mental issues. So yeah, we can talk for hours, but big show. It was a big show. We want to thank Steve Goreham from Green Breakdown. He's been on several times, national figure, talking about all the silliness. And today it was, they're trying to take my jeans away. So no.
And his book is excellent.
It is excellent.
People
honestly
really need to read it.
One of my
to
tops.
Understand the big picture of what these climate idiots are doing to us.
And then, oh my goodness, Florida Representative Dr. Joel Rudman from over, in the Santa Rosa area. Fantastic. Called us from Italy. I am so having him back. He was amazing. Enjoyed that. And then attorney Daniel R. Street, his book called Fake News Exposed about Trump, and he's got like 3 of them out there, and he breaks it all down, all the fake news and the lies, and there's been nonstop that he could write 3 books on it, and so he was excellent.
His book, if you go to his website, danielrstreet.com, you can download his book for free. I mean, the audiobook, and I thought that was pretty good.
I know. I'm going to have to do that. That's excellent. But next show, I've got Zach Sanchez from the boutique real estate agency Think, and he's a broker owner, and he's taken Bay County by storm. And there's a lot happening in the real estate world with the fees, which, as a someday seller, I'm okay with, but we'll talk to him, and he's a mover and shaker here in Bay County. So big show next week. And John, have a great week.
You too, Veronica.
God bless everyone, and thanks for joining Veronica Live.